What's going on, guys? Thanks for listening. I'm Francis Gunn.
And I'm April Cattell.
And you are listening to Resistance is Dumb Supplemental. It is stardate 052720. It is our 74th day of quarantine. And not much has changed, but we're taking a little break from our normal hijinks of the movie reviews and just bullshitting. We actually have a really special guest for you guys tonight. My good friend and adjunct professor, Cris Livecchi. He teaches in the Department of Geography at SUNY New Paltz. He's also a writer, satirist, comedian, comic book shop owner, hurdy-gurdy builder, husband, father, and all-around splendid human being, and one of my best friends. And we will unpack all of that piece by piece. Cris, are you there?
I'm here.
Do you like his radio voice? He goes into like radio voice when he does this podcast.
I'm not
with
doing
me.
on purpose.
I approve.
Every time the fucking camera goes on, he goes into radio voice.
Well, that's good. That's a skill.
Indeed. One that I do not have.
I'm also wiping in between my fingers with a tissue right now, something I always do before I go on stage to stand up.
Huh.
So evidently I'm nervous.
It's also hot as fucking here. We had to close all the windows, turn the fan off and everything so we could get better audio quality, and now it's like a sauna.
You know, and all the times that I've gone on stage with you, I've never seen you wipe between your fingers. I'm going to look for that from now on. Like,
if we have the opportunity.
Yeah, no kidding.
First things first, how are you, Captain Resume?
I'm getting by, I think, pretty much like everybody else. How are you?
Great. You know, it's hard to bitch because people are like, yeah, I know.
Right.
It's like sitting on top. Well, no. Okay, this was a very bad comparison I was about to make. But I just pictured somebody sitting on top of a roof during Hurricane Katrina, like bitching to the people sitting on the roof next to their house.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of it's an apt comparison. Like, this is just a big pile of absolute shit, and we're in it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm doing well considering I haven't had to like hammer my way out of my roof yet.
That's true. Nobody's had to resort to cannibalism.
Yeah.
We haven't had to, knock them down, drag out fist fights in Hannaford.
I've gotten pretty close, but haven't actually crossed that line into like fisticuffs quite yet.
Have we not? I've seen people punching about masks and shit.
No, I'm saying us personally.
You said we have not had.
You and I.
Oh well, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, people, motherfuckers are.
Right, but compared to the general population, we're doing pretty good because you and I have not had to punch anyone in Hannaford's quite yet.
Yes, but that sounds about right. I mean, all things considered, all things considered.
We don't say that on this show.
Oh, very good. In the great balance of all of the things happening right now, I'm doing.
Yeah.
You're doing what? I didn't hear that.
I'm doing great. I'm drinking. How are you?
That was my next question, actually. What are you drinking?
I am drinking a nice double of Deadwood bourbon on two nice big rocks. Courtesy, can I plug the
plug
sure.
I bought it from? Is that okay?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. Courtesy of Windmill Wine and Spirits up in Saugerties, who delivered liquor to my door.
Nice.
That might have
so
even
crazy.
been
Nice.
Dude, I'm so messed up in terms of time that I have no idea what day it is. I think they delivered today, but it could have been like a week ago and I wouldn't know.
That has totally been happening to me, and it's all right. So my last day of class was like 2 weeks ago. I think yours was like 1 week after mine, and ever since that day, I haven't been able to keep track of what day it is anymore. It's making my head crazy.
Oh yeah.
The most regular thing I'm doing right now is this podcast.
So now, April, when did your university switch over to online classes, or were you already doing online?
No, I was not doing online. We switched to online, and it was really like not a great type of class to switch to online.
But we are drinking homemade pomegranate margaritas that April whipped up in the blender.
I can't fucking figure this out. I'm trying to get so I'm very picky about mixed cocktails. My dad and I decided we were going to be mixology nerds like 3 or 4 years ago, and he's taken it to another level. I'm like not quite to his level, but I was like, all right, no, I got to make like, how do I make the perfect margarita? But then when you blend it, it already like is bastardizing it because now it's full of ice, and then it throws off the flavor ratios because you have all this melted water. Anyway, I'm very disappointed. This is like my 3rd iteration of this fucking frozen pomegranate margarita, and it's still not perfect.
Less ice. I mean, honestly, for just from a bartending standpoint, that melt water is an ingredient in the drink, right? So, like for a martini or something, you would want to, stir that ice to get some of the melt water in there, and that ends up becoming part of an ingredient or one of the ingredients in the martini. And I think it's the same thing with margaritas.
I think so too. And so I think for my tests for my 4th one, the different change I'm going to do with my 4th one is instead of using simple syrup, I'm going to cut the water from the simple syrup and just use sugar and like stir the fuck out of it before I blend it with the ice so that I can get less water in there. That's the only thing I can think to cut, because like I'd add more ice to make it like a slushy and then it wouldn't be strong enough. So I'd add more fucking margarita ingredients and then it'd be too liquidy. It was like a back and forth.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never worked at a place. Well, the one time that I worked at a place where we did blended margaritas, I was a food runner and a waiter. So I would watch the bartenders in absolute awe, just free pouring these ingredients, into the blenders, and they had 2 blenders and they would both be going simultaneously because it was like a Tex-Mex margarita place. And I honestly couldn't tell you. All I know is that they served their margaritas in pint glasses, which the first time I made a margarita at a bar, I got yelled at because I served it in a pint glass because I've never seen it any other way. But,
right.
But yeah, like I have no idea how they, like in retrospect, having been behind the bar now, I'm like, I have no idea how they would have balanced this. Like it's crazy.
I've only bartended one time, and it was when I was living in Ecuador. And they have these fucking beachfront stands that you get fresh juice from during the day, and then at night the whole beach turns into this like moving around bar with all of these little cocktail stands everywhere. Oh my God. So I was bartending one of those, and all we served was mixed drinks. Blended drinks, because that's all anyone fucking wanted when they were on the beach. But for some reason, I can't figure out this fucking margarita.
I don't know. I don't know what to tell you though, but that sort of roving, bar scene on a beat, that sounds like heaven to me right there.
It was heaven and hell, because it was heaven on off season, but then on high season when you had tourists from every corner of the world. This was like the spring break town of South America. Not for if you live in Argentina, you would come to the village if anyone's listening to this that is from another part of the world, I'm talking about Montañita. It's like the party town of Ecuador, of the entire freaking region. And it was fucking insane. People were like high schoolers coming to Ecuador to get away from their parents and getting insane. It was like the most crazy part. It's like the New Orleans of fucking Ecuador. It was insane.
That sounds crazy. What were you doing in Ecuador?
The off season was fantastic, because then it was just mostly locals, and it was really relaxed and wonderful, and I loved living right around there.
Yeah. So what was it that sent you to Ecuador in the first place?
Well, I mean, I wanted to join the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps has always been a big part of my life, because the reason my mom made it to America was because of a Peace Corps volunteer. A Peace Corps volunteer and her bonded, and then she had all these arrangements made so she could come to the States with a student green card, and then that's met my dad, blah blah blah. So Peace Corps has always been really important in my family, and then I went to try to apply for it, and it's not like it was in the 60s and 70s. It's like a year-long application process, and they take a very small percentage of the applicants. And I was like, well, why do I want to join the Peace Corps? I want to live in another country, learn another language, another culture, and try to be helpful. I can do that without the fucking Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. So I just saved some money, and I got in a plane, and I just went to Ecuador and didn't come back for 2 years.
Jesus, wow.
There was no plan.
That just sounds like an incredible moment in your life. Wow, how cool is that?
It was pretty crazy too, because I didn't speak a word of Spanish when I showed up.
That'll learn you, literally.
Yeah. most thought out plan. But I don't know if it's just because I got lucky or because people have a bigger idea of how difficult that is than it really is. It worked out fantastic, and it was a great fucking.
And how's your Spanish now?
Now it's perfect.
Oh,
I mean,
good.
it's a little rusty because I've been back in America for a while, but I was completely professionally business fluent. I was working in a Spanish-speaking business by the time I left.
Wow, after 2 years, that's amazing. Fantastic.
They always say that's the best way to learn is just like sink or swim.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Trying to learn I tried to learn French for all high school and most of middle school. I couldn't tell you a word of French, but after 3 months living in Ecuador, I could already have like normal conversations, and I couldn't do that in French. And they said that study that shit for like 6 years.
Yeah, that's like, so I took French in high school. I remember a little bit. I took Italian in college. I remember a little bit. I'm studying Turkish now.
Yeah, I see your posts about that.
Oh, it's completely different because it's a completely different language family. But
Why are you learning Turkish?
Oh, because my wife, who is a real professor, at the same time, she's an historian. She studies ancient Rome and really sort of the eastern provinces of ancient Rome, in particular Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey. So we, on occasion, will go to Turkey for several weeks for her to do research. And the last
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And the last time we went, it was just the two of us, and we drove around the Turkish countryside for like 4 weeks, and we had studied together a little bit beforehand, but I think I had a little bit more time to put into it. So, and I was a little bit more confident, I think, in speaking it. So when we got there, basically I was the driver, interpreter, and all-around male companion in a country that's very sort of gender segregated. And
right.
But it's a tough language, man. So like, and I think about what it would be like to be in a place like that for, 3 months or a year or 2 years, and to have to learn the language from the ground up. I don't know that I could do it. So, I mean, I'm super impressed by anybody who can just like jump into another country and learn the language and take off. Like that's amazing.
Well, having Spanish being the same sort of language group as English probably helped, and French. But yeah. I mean, in terms of your point of trying to learn a language that's a totally different group, my dad moved to Tonga with my mother, and all they had to study from back then, all he had, because first of all, Tongan's still not in any like Google Translate, Facebook Translator. It's still not in any of those. But back then he couldn't even get like a booklet to like with like grammar charts or anything. So he literally got a dictionary. That's the only thing he find.
Oh
and just started memorizing words out of the dictionary, no grammar. And then showed up in Tonga with my mom, and he said that like he could communicate because he would just be throwing nouns out. And so people would sort of kind of pick up on it, but I mean,
book.
Yeah, it's just funny. The resources are so different nowadays for that kind of shit.
Right,
yeah, it totally is.
Go ahead. I'm just sitting here crossing things off my list because we're talking about all of them, which is good.
Yeah, no, it's better. It flows in the conversation.
But I do actually have this written down. Yeah. How do you say resistance is dumb in Turkish?
Ooh, yes.
I don't know offhand, but I can look it up and pronounce it for you based on what I have. So let's see. Let's Google Translate this.
Let's see. How do you say that in Spanish? La resistencia es tonta.
Say it again. I'd step on you.
La resistencia es tonta.
So Google is telling me Direnç Aptal.
Direnç Aptal.
You know what I realized about our name? So we chose our name just because Francis was like, this is funny, because we watched Star Trek, and he was like, resistance is dumb. But then afterwards, I've had more than one person be like, is this some kind of like political statement about resist? And I'm like, God damn it, that's exactly what it sounds like. No, that's not it. I like the resistance. I'm a resistor.
I grew up the kid of a hardcore Trekkie, like
oh really, me too.
Yeah, so like when I was like in middle school, we were watching Next Generation together when it first aired on TV. So I was totally on board with Resistance is Dumb. I thought I could hear Francis saying it when I saw the title. I could hear Francis saying it.
Yeah, my dad and all of his cousins, so like all of my uncles and my dad were all Trekkies. But they were all strictly original series Trekkies because they're, I don't know. That's just what they had when they were kids. And so I didn't actually watch Next Generation until a couple years ago.
Yeah.
But I could name you every episode. You could show me a clip of any original series scene, and I'd to be able to tell you which episode it's from.
That's fantastic.
That much, yeah.
So I wanted to touch on a brief history for the listeners of yours and mine relationship, so they have some perspective on that.
Oh, sure.
I met Cris at an open mic. Cris is uncomfortable when I refer to him as a comedian. I don't know what else you'd fucking call it.
I'm not sure what I would call it either.
If I have to call Jeff Dunham a comedian, you're definitely a comedian.
All right.
But he's been in almost every show I've ever produced. And we, believe it or not, actually held a lecture on comedy in a college aesthetics class, which is that a branch of psychology?
It's philosophy.
Okay, sorry, philosophy, yeah. That went way better than if you know me, you'd think after hearing me say that. No one was triggered. But and then Cris started bartending at the place I worked the last couple of years, The Anchor. And so we've been coworkers as well as friends, as well as, co-performers. And so if we sound a bit jovial, it's because we are very close. I just want to give a little context on that. But speaking of the rest, I'm sorry to say speaking of something.
Well, you're doing
anyway,
Radio Man voice. You got to do Radio Man phrases.
The restaurant, my last day there was March 14th. They called it St. Patrick's Day weekend right before the whatever parade and everything.
The Shamrock Run.
Yeah.
How much? Because that was when they called, takeout only.
Yeah.
Like, how much have you been there since then?
I have been there up until the last week I think up until the last week, I was there once a week. And I was there. So I've had a Sunday night bartending shift for, I don't know, something like 2 or 3 years at the Anchor. And that's been, I love my Sunday night shift because I love that it's a lot of industry people and they come in and everybody's pretty chill and not everybody knows everybody else, but like you see a lot of sort of like people from different bars and restaurants in the area who sort of come in and have a rough idea of who one another is. So like there's always good conversation and stuff. So I really miss that, but I kept working my Sunday night shift and then there were some staffing weirdness. Some things got shuffled around and I started doing delivery on Saturday nights. So now, and I sort of went from Sundays to Saturdays, but now I'm doing deliveries on Saturday and I am sort of filling in for one of the managers on Sunday nights. And that's, so like this past weekend was the first Saturday, Sunday combo that I've had since I cut my Saturday nights out back in January, I think.
So how's the difference feel? I mean, obviously the bartending is completely different, but like, as the manager, you probably have a pretty clear feeling of the difference between before and after too.
It's really vastly different because, okay, so first off, you don't really have, so the whole restaurant industry has changed in the sense that you just don't have people walking in off the street, being sat at tables and then doing all the things that you're accustomed to doing. So I think when we switched to doing takeout and delivery, people weren't really sure what that meant in terms of how they were expected to behave in the space. So like early on, we still had people coming in saying, "Hey, can I taste this, this, and this from the taps?" Ooh. And we'd be like, and then,
really?
Oh yeah, there were a couple of people who were like, "I want to try all 3 IPAs that you have."
Oh yeah, that's completely normal.
Yeah. Well, yes, but like
we had to cut that off at tables because people would do it at tables. We'd be packed, and you'd be running back and forth, and like the 5th thing, they're like, "I don't know, can I try?" And it's like, "No, dude, like you need to figure this out."
Yeah, a friend would come to me and say, "I'm really sorry, but can I please get a sample of fill in the blank?" And it would always be an IPA, and it would always be, like. That would be the one thing that they would end up ordering. Like this is the last one. So I think Francis would go back and say, "This is the last one you get." And then they'd be like, "Oh, that's really good." Right. So if you don't give people choices, they're like, "Oh, that's great." That's wonderful. I'll take it.
So
yeah, it's called dictatorship.
I'm just shocked that people would still thought that you could do that. And by shocked, I don't actually mean shocked. I mean, we've all seen the videos of people acting insane. So like people being stupid enough to think that like, hey, during a takeout time where everyone might have COVID and everyone's scared, I should be ordering samples at a bar.
Yeah. And I will say, like, in the first couple weeks of the lockdown, there were moments where I kind of wanted to turn to a customer and say, are you aware that there's a pandemic?
Right.
It's you know, it's like saying there's a war on, you know, like, are you aware of this fact that that we're all sort of stuck in this situation where any single one of us could be horribly, horribly ill and not know it and be giving it to one another because you're in here without a mask and you're asking me to taste everything. And, you know, like, but that stopped relatively quickly.
Oh, good.
And I think people started, you know, it probably took about 4 weeks before people really figured it out. But I think during that time, you know, the restaurant itself had to sort of develop a system that worked to get people in and out comfortably. And I think, you know, like, there was a lot of confusion in the beginning about like, well, when I come to pick up my order, do I call, do I text, do I walk in? So like now there's signage and takeout windows and things like that. So like it's changed in the sense that what used to be a space that was accessible to anybody who would walk in off the street with the intention to buy something is now really contested and no longer, like, the boundaries are no longer clear. We've pushed the part that's employee only up to the very front of the shop, you know, like.
Oh, really? Because I picked up a couple shifts there, I think last month, and you guys still had the table for, like, at the end, the far end of the bar.
Oh yeah. So now instead of a table, it's like a big folding, like a dressing screen, a big wooden one that says employees only.
That's probably smart.
Yeah, it's really smart because there were a lot of people who would be like, oh, I'm just going to walk around this table. You know, again, like, people, for whatever reason, just don't seem to read the cues of the landscape in front of them, which is really weird. You know?
What are you talking about?
I
know not of which you speak.
You know what I will say? I don't know if it was just because the 2 times that I've worked there, I got really lucky, or if this has been the trend at the Anchor specifically. But I heard a lot from friends of mine who are doing deliveries at various places that they were not being tipped. Like, they were actually, like, besides the first week, they were not getting what I would assume everyone would think, hey, this is a person working in a time where it's really hard to be working at, like, we should tip them. And that kind of dried up after the first week or 2. But then when I went and worked at the Anchor with you guys, I didn't have a single person not tip the entire night, and I was doing delivery. Yeah. So I don't know if that's like just like you guys have a really good customer group that is loyal and is still there, or if that was just a freak accident the night that I was working. It's
sort of a mixed bag in the sense that on any given night. So I'm still doing deliveries on Saturday nights, and I think probably since you've been there, they've changed the ordering system a little bit, so like you can order in advance, pay in advance, tip in advance, and what I've noticed over the last 8 or 9 weeks, whatever it's been, more and more people are tipping up front, and the people who are tipping up front are being really generous. And
right, they had that system, and then there was like a couple people who didn't tip up front, and they all gave cash. Nobody shorted.
Oh, we've definitely had more and more people in the last 2 weeks who just don't tip at all. And really, honestly, it was within my last shift that I saw probably 3 or 4 people who just didn't tip anything. And it's the same thing that happens, you know, but here's the thing that happened before the pandemic too, where once in a while you would get somebody come in, be really demanding and entitled. And I'm not saying that this is endemic to the Anchor, but this is something that, you know,
right.
You would see at any bar or restaurant. There's always going to be a customer who comes in, demands a lot of the bartender, demands a lot of, or a server demands a lot of their attention, their time, and then just doesn't tip. And I think a lot of times those are people who have never worked in industry. And I think that becomes more pronounced when they think about the fact that, well, I'm getting food because I need food to survive, and this is where I can get it takeout. And oh, you guys are working, so you must be getting paid. And I think, you know, most people don't recognize the fact that it's legal to pay servers and bartenders significantly less than minimum wage. Like, you know, and a lot of people don't know that. Like, there are places where the base rate for a server is like $3 an hour, and sometimes even less. So,
I know it's higher in New York State now, but when I was serving, which was, I guess, the last time I served in the States was like 9 years ago. Back then, the hourly rate was $2 and change.
Yeah. I think I used to make, when I was first waiting tables in Massachusetts, in Boston, I was making $2.36 an hour plus tips. And the deal was, the federal law, I think, was if the combination of wages and tips doesn't meet minimum wage, then the employer is required to top it off so that you at least get the equivalent of minimum wage for your shift. But I don't know, like, it's hard to sort of watch in your paycheck to see if they're actually doing that, and I don't, at the Anchor, we're paid better than $2.36 an hour for sure. But we do really survive on tips. And right now it's even tougher because, so if you're a bartender, if there are 2 bartenders on, you're pulling the tips between yourself and the other bartender, and then you get a tip out from the servers. Now with the pandemic sort of takeout situation, everybody who's front of the house is being tipped, and it's all pooled. So if you've got a host, an expo, who's sort of bagging up the food and getting it ready and getting the tickets all set up, you've got 2 delivery drivers and 2 people behind the bar. We're now pooling tips equally between 6 people. So it's like our take-home pay my take-home pay for a Saturday night shift is about half what it would be in terms of tips otherwise.
Damn.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have probably estimated that, but still.
Yeah. But I mean, the fact that it's half what it would be, and we're splitting it 6 ways, and our shifts are only 4 hours. Like, on the other hand, that tells me that people are, at least, the people who are tipping pretty generously. So I don't, again, like April, I don't know whether it's just that we have a good customer base, or whether people are just cognizant of the hazards of driving delivery in a time like this or whatever. But we've been pretty lucky, I think.
The one thing, I mean, Instacart's annoying, but the one thing I like about Instacart is that you can see the tip before you. I don't think people realize that. Anyone listening to this who uses Instacart, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people, we can see what you tip before we accept the thing. So if you're sitting there wondering why nobody's accepting your fucking grocery order, it's because we see that you didn't tip. All right?
I don't know if it was Instacart specifically, but wasn't there people doing that and like putting big tips and then changing them?
Yeah. I saw a news article about that, but it's never happened to me.
Now that you mentioned Instacart, I actually have a question about that.
All right.
I know a couple people who have ordered their groceries, and I don't know if it's through Instacart or some other service, but they order like 1 pound of green beans, and the person packed 1 green bean.
Yeah.
So
here's the
I
thing.
think I heard about that.
So do they show you the units? Do they show you the units, or is it just like guess?
No, they show you the units. So I feel like there's one of 2 things going on here. So either the person who is ordering the groceries meant to do 1 pound and didn't put it in right.
Yeah.
Or the person who is picking up the groceries is an idiot and just read it wrong. But there's anything that has a weight to it. There's a space where we're supposed to, wherever we are in the grocery store, we have to go find a scale and weigh it before we can move on. And then you put in the weight. And like, there's no reason that should have happened. I've seen that too. So there's 2. Yeah, it's either the person ordering's a moron and they put in 1 and didn't check the units, or the person picking up is a moron and put in 1 and didn't check the units. One of the 2.
Or they were mad and they were fucking with them.
Or they were mad because they didn't tip well, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That's funny. That's really funny.
I mean, I think also, like, on my side of things, I've had people order like 1 pound of grapes, not realizing that like that grape bag that you grab in the grocery store, if you just grab a grape bag and weigh it, it usually weighs like 3 pounds. Yeah. And so like, and the fucking app will not let me change it to 3. Like, I know that's what the person really wanted. They wanted a bag of grapes, but because they had to guess the pounds, I have to go through and like break the fucking thing in half and like put it in another bag, which seems so scummy to me. Like, I don't like fucking with like units of food in the vegetable aisle. Like, you take it or you don't. But I'm like, all right, I have to do it or else the app won't let me keep going. And then I know that person's gonna be fucking pissed when they get their groceries and there's like one tiny little bunch in this huge bag. I'm like, well.
There's no option like bag of grapes.
No, because apparently that's how they're sold. Like, if it's sold in pounds, they have to do it in pounds. Just most people don't open a bag, break off half the grapes, and then put it, and then take the rest of it. They just grab a bag.
That's just a public service announcement. Grapes.
Yes, for people who are ordering things.
Yeah, well, they're full of
way
water.
More than 1 pound.
Yeah, it's because grapes have a lot of fucking water in them. Water is heavy.
Yes. If you want a bag of grapes, put somewhere like 2.5.
Yeah. I would like exactly 3.1 pounds of grapes, please.
Dude, if we're off, if the scale weight is off by like more than like 1/10 of a pound, it gives us this big red thing and it says, "Are you sure if you do this and someone complains, you're gonna get in trouble?" And it's like, all right, fine, God. I'll do it.
Okay, so this gets me to my biggest gripe of the era in which we live, which is that we live in fucking review culture.
And I know.
I hate it. I hate it. I hate it with a passion.
This is why fucking Karen culture exists. Karen culture is review culture. Like, we've created this culture where it's like customers always right. They're like, you are allowed to be rude as fuck to somebody who's working if it's not exactly the way you want it. Like, dude, people need to fucking relax.
Oh, I had a guy come in once when I was bartending, and I think it was on a Sunday night, and he's somebody who is sort of a known quantity in town and somebody with a lot of money. I'm not going to name names or say what establishment he's tied to or anything like that. But he comes in and he's with 2 younger people, one of whom works for him and the other one is that person's boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. I can't remember who was what. And he says, "Look, I'm going to be a total dick to this bartender. And I've got a lot of money, so I can just get away with it. He's going to do whatever I ask him to do." And he was horribly, there was another staff member who had finished their shift and were sitting at the end of the bar doing some schoolwork. And this guy was being really rude to them. He was being really rude to me. He was being really rude. Like, he was so rude that other customers around him started complaining. Wow. And like, I had to deal with this guy all night. And it was the kind of thing where he was like, look, I got so much money. I can just throw this around. And I think implicit in that was, and if I don't get my way, well, I'll write a bad review. Right. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants a bad Yelp review. Nobody wants a bad review on Google. Like, you know, it's horrible. So you end up basically just bending over backwards to entertain people who otherwise, you know, if you saw them on the street, you would walk away. And it just like it dehumanizes us, you know, like there's no longer, you know, I sort of watch old movies sometimes from the 40s and 50s where you see like the mechanic who's like super neat and clean with a pressed suit and a you know, a jaunty cap, you know, and very clearly takes pride in his work. Right. But I feel like the service industry now is such that because we are at the mercy of reviews and anybody can write a terrible review about a place that they've never even been. I don't think this necessarily happens, but like if somebody wanted to tank a place, all they'd have to do is write a few bad reviews, right?
Oh, it totally happens. That's 4chan and Reddit. They're great at that.
Yeah.
If there's a reason to go after someone, they post it and then everyone goes after them.
Oh, and they go dox them. Yeah, if they dox them, yeah. But I was thinking more about like just straight up Yelp or Google, whatever. You know, like I think most of the people who use those are people who have actually been to a place, but there's 2 issues with that. Like, one is that it puts us in a position where we, you know, taking pride in our work is not enough. We have to pander, and pandering is puts you in a position of being completely dehumanized. That's sort of part 1. And what was part 2? My brain moves really fast sometimes and I can't always keep up.
I feel you, man. That's why I say rambly.
It'll come back to it. You know, it'll come back to me. But I think there was another issue that I had with it, and I think that was all right. It'll come back eventually, and suddenly I'll just shout out like, you know, reviews are bad.
I'm a little nervous to go back to rideshare once I feel safe enough to do it, because I'm probably going to start doing it again. They've been sending us emails begging. Apparently, there's all these people who are starting to need to move around again, and not enough drivers want to risk their health. So they've been just begging and begging for us to come back. I'm not going to yet, but at some point I will. And I'm probably still going to require people to wear a mask when they get in my car, even if it's not like the executive order at the time, because I'm not like, just because our numbers get down doesn't mean we can't have another outbreak. That's part of what social distancing causes, is less people having immunity, which means another outbreak is possible at any time. I'm going to make people wear their mask when they get in my car. And I'm already foreseeing the rage and frustration and anger from people who are already refusing to wear masks in grocery stores, let alone in a rideshare now. Like, I don't even see, at least if you're working in Costco and someone decides to throw a fucking fit over wearing a mask, you have your coworkers around you. I'm a little worried about doing that with a car and being alone and having to deal with some crazy, angry conspiracy theorist.
Well, you already deal with some pretty ridiculous people doing right. Like, I've heard some of your stories, and every time I read a story of like, oh yeah, this guy was hitting on me and, you know, couldn't figure out that I wasn't interested and was acting all creepy. Like, every time I hear one of those stories, even though I know that this stuff happens every day, I'm just astounded by how horrible people can be. You know, it's just.
And it brings it back to what your point with the pandering, like feeling like you have to put up with certain behaviors because it is a review. Like, that entire job is reviewed, and the moment our star rating drops below 4.5, they fire us, equivalent of firing us. Like, if I have to tell 2 or 3 people to fuck off in a month, if the 4th person starts fucking with me, I am going to not tell them to fuck off and put up with whatever they put me through, because I can't have my star rating drop below 4.5, and I know about how many people I can piss off in a month to keep it above that number. You know what I mean? Yeah. I can only piss off like 3 people in a month if I'm working like full time. So and that 4th person's going to get away with murder.
Yeah. And then, you know, the other part about it is that it basically, so like, not only are we pandering, but in the course of pandering, we're not concentrating on doing our jobs well. We're concentrating on entertaining people and being, you know, and it's like, I am all in fit. Like, if you were to meet me on the street, you would think, oh, okay, he's a nice enough guy. Like, he's pretty friendly or whatever, even though I can be pretty reserved too. But the level to which I have to jump and dance and do things that, like, act in ways that I'm not always 100% comfortable acting, just because I feel like I have to take on the persona of somebody who's going to get a good review, is it really is exhausting. And it's like that in the classroom for me too. Like, even classrooms are review based. You know, you would think, oh, you know, being a professor, you know, teaching college students, oh, well, it's really about the quality of the education that you're giving them. And I would say that, like, somewhere between 30 and 60% of it is the quality of the education that you're giving them. But a significant chunk of it is, how entertained are they? How much do they feel that I care about them? How much do they laugh in my classroom? And that has been, you know, that's really tough.
Or how entitled they are to whatever it is they think is supposed to be on their receipt for their tuition.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, that's been less of a problem for me at SUNY New Paltz, but I got my doctorate at another university. I guess I'll mention it. I got my doctorate at Penn State. And
you're so fancy. I didn't know you got a doctorate from Penn State. Look at you. Penn State.
It's not. I mean, I think the reason I hesitated to mention it was because Penn State has a sort of cult following within.
Yes, there's all the creepy people from Penn State, but Penn State is a legitimately, like, very high tier university. If we just put aside the bullshit for a second and all the crazy people who do the football shit.
Yeah, and it's a really good school in a lot of ways, and it's got one of the top rated geography programs in the country for doctoral doctoral studies.
I didn't know I guess I should have known you were Dr. Cris. I'm sorry I didn't call you Dr. I'm going to call you Dr. Cris from now on, just so you know.
You really don't. Oh, April, you really don't.
It's too late.
Should we be calling him Dr. Cris?
It's too late. This is the thing now.
I know it's too late, but there's no reason to change the
I mean, I knew you were a college professor, so I should have assumed, but I have several professors who aren't doctors, so I just didn't think about it. And
there's a lot of adjunct and lecturers, you know, adjunct professors and lecturers are master's students or have master's degrees rather than doctorates. I always feel a little bit weird saying, yes, I have a PhD, but especially when I'm working, like if I'm bartending or something like that, I always feel a little bit weird saying it, because on the one hand, so people have these perceptions of who you are when you work in service.
Yeah.
And then if you say something like, oh, I've got a master's degree or I've got a doctorate or something, it completely changes the way that they think about you.
Yep.
And then I sometimes worry that, like, if I admit to having the level of education that I have, that people will think that I'm being, that I'm being arrogant or I'm being hoity-toity or something like that. And the reality is, like, if I admit to it, it's usually with a little bit of like, oh, should I even say this? And with a lot of like, I'm only saying this because there's some sort of context where it makes sense for me to talk about it.
Right.
But they're just drilling you with questions about yourself, like everybody fucking does.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'm probably the least loved bartender at the Anchor. I feel like the people who, because I work with a lot of industry folks, so like there's not the cult of personality around me that there is around other bartenders there, where if they work on like a Thursday night or something like that, somebody who's not in industry is going there
Dr.
to
Chris.
Yeah.
We are in your cult of your personality.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But
even if it's a cult of 3, we'll get that number up. I'm sure your wife's probably in the cult too, so that's 4, and your son.
I know. I was thinking she must be the 3rd member of the cult, because. All
right, so you have a 5-member cult of your personality. That's a pretty good start.
Yeah, I'll take it. I mean, I don't really need a big cult of personality. Yeah. So going way back. So I got my doctorate at Penn State, and I don't see this as much at New Paltz. In fact, I see it very, very little at New Paltz, but I often saw it at Penn State and also at Northeastern, where I got one of my master's degrees. People.
Tiny master's
No, sorry.
Northeastern, another very good school. In case anyone didn't know, continue.
It's pretty good, yeah. So I would get students on the regular who were like, I paid for this class. I deserve better than a C or a C plus or a D or whatever they happen to get. And I'm like, no, you didn't pay for a grade. You paid for an opportunity to learn something from somebody who is teaching you. And if you didn't do well, there are a couple of potential reasons for that. One is that maybe the professor absolutely sucked, which is a legitimate thing, because there are some professors who just don't teach well. Or 2, maybe that professor is a really good professor, but didn't teach to a style that you're comfortable with. That's legit too. Or 3, you're just a shitty student who, like you're, and again, like I would never say this about my students at New Paltz. But I have encountered students in the past who are like, had this sense of entitlement that like, oh, I paid this tuition, therefore I deserve something better than, an average grade. And that's, again, like that comes back to review culture, where, we get reviewed by our students. And maybe this was the sort of going way back. Maybe this is the, sort of the other thing that I was thinking about is frustrating about review culture. So we get reviewed once in a while by our, by other members of the faculty. For adjuncts, less so than like tenure track professors get reviewed significantly more often than sort of part-timers like me. But we also get reviewed by our students. And,
I have a confession to make when you're done with this.
Well, okay. And here's the thing. I definitely want constructive feedback from my students. If there were things that I did that really weren't working for people, and I have a full class worth of data to say, okay, this assignment didn't do what I wanted it to do, the students felt like they didn't get anything out of it, I'll scrap that and do something else. And I do that from semester to semester. I change my assignments up if I feel like they're not working, right? And every class is a slightly different class in terms of their dynamic and in terms of the cultural references that they're bringing in and in terms of just sort of the way that they are in the world. So like, you also have to sort of average it out over a longer span of time and take it with a grain of salt. But students also don't see the work that we put into our classes. So sometimes they'll say, well, this was dumb. But what they don't recognize is that this thing that we do that seems dumb to 1 or 2 students is actually super helpful to a lot of other students. So there's that question of like, what works for an individual student versus what works for a class, and what's effective as something that I do as a professor in the span of a semester versus what I do in the span of 5 years or 10 years. So review culture is especially weird that way. And like, you could go on Rate My Professor and see exactly what people are saying about me. I look at it once in a while just to see how many people have reviewed me or whatever. And it's it's weird sort of feeling like, and especially as an adjunct, the potential that I'm rehired from year to year or from semester to semester, because we only work on like a semester long contract, is really based on.
I'm sorry, is that what that means?
What, being an adjunct? Yeah, adjunct. So an adjunct, I guess I should explain that. Adjunct professors are people who are hired on a contract basis to teach 1 to 2 and maybe once in a while 3 courses per semester. We're paid by the credit. So if you're teaching 3 credits currently at SUNY New Paltz, that's about $3,400 per, like if you're teaching a 3 credit class. So like for the entirety of a semester, for teaching 1 class, I would get about $3,400, which is paid for. I think I did the math once, and I realized that having 6 students pays for the entirety of my salary for that class for that semester. So, but I'm usually teaching 35 students. So so adjuncts are part-time. We are contract. We are, we're sort of under this broader umbrella of contingent faculty who are other, so that includes like full-time lecturers who are basically just contract employees. And we're usually the first people to get axed if there's budget issues. And we often teach, unless you're really lucky, like in my department, we tend to teach introductory level classes and that's it. And in a lot of departments, you end up basically teaching the same 3 intro classes, or the same intro class period over and over. And it's a weird way to be an academic, because I think the typical student assumes that maybe you're making $10,000 or $15,000 a class, but you're not.
Right.
Oh, you've got a PhD, so you must be making good money, but you're not. And like, when people are like, oh, if you're a professor, why are you a bartender? I'm like, because I was making more money bartending 2 shifts a week, Saturday and Sunday night, right? I was making more money doing that in, I think, 6 weeks than I was for the entirety. Like 6 weeks of bartending would be, 2 shifts a week would be the equivalent of teaching a class that meets twice a week for 15 weeks.
And that's not even counting all the work that you do outside of the class. I don't know. I mean, the adjunct that I had last semester, all of the lesson planning, the tests, everything was already pre-made for him. Yeah. But I know a lot of adjuncts who have to do all their own classes by themselves.
Yeah, I do everything from scratch. Like one of my classes I've been sort of, working on and tinkering with and honing for the last, I don't know, I've been at New Paltz for 6 years now. I just finished my 6th year at New Paltz, and it's a class that I love. It's a class that I will gladly teach until the day that I die. It's a class that I'm always going to be working on. It's always a work in progress, but every exam that I make it. Every assignment that I give, that's something that came out of me thinking at 3:00 in the morning when I can't sleep.
People don't realize how time consuming that shit is. It is
really don't.
Time consuming. I've taught 1 college level course. I taught English at a local university when I was in Ecuador. And like, I can't imagine doing it from scratch for multiple classes. Like for that one class, I had 1 class. That was all I had to worry about. And it was so much fucking work starting from scratch. And as an adjunct, you're probably getting a lot more classes from scratch than you do for if you were what do they call it if you're non-adjunct? Just like
so if you're like tenure track,
tenure track.
Yeah. So
is that how that works? You have to do adjunct for a while and then you get tenure, and that's what that means? Like,
No. See, that would be it would be great if that was what that meant. But so here's for for people who are less familiar, here's how academia works. You get your degree, you go on the market, and you can't just, so my mom thinks that I can just like send a resume to any university and maybe they'll hire me. But it doesn't really work like that. You have to apply to a department that does the kind of things that you do. So I'm a geographer. My best bet would be to find a job in a geography department, or failing that, sometimes sociology departments or earth science departments or anthropology departments will have a geographer. I do I'm a cultural geographer, so like I tend more toward like the anthropological and sociological side of things than toward the like physical side. And there's a question. Geography is a huge discipline, so like it's really weird that way. But so one, you have to apply to a university that has a department that is looking for the kind of person who does the kind of work that you do. the second thing is they have to have a tenure line. So everybody who has a long-term, full-time tenure job or tenure line job at a university is somebody for whom they did a specific search for that position. So it's like, it's like if you work for a big corporation and they're looking for a vice president, a junior assistant vice president for communications. That's a really specific job description. Or they're looking for, or a nonprofit who's looking for a director of development and communications or something like that. It's a really specific job description with a really specific skill set that comes with it. It's the same way in academia, where it's like, okay, we're looking for a geographer who does climate science, and they have to be willing to teach physical geography, but also cartography. So like finding somebody with that particular skill set is going to be tough, even though there's a lot of qualified people out there. There's probably not going to be one person who necessarily fits the job description. So there's always going to be a little bit of compromise, but like to find a university that is looking for that has a job for the kind of work that I do is almost impossible.
Or you have to be willing to drop everything and move all the way across the country the moment a thing opens up, which is difficult when you have a family.
Yeah.
Like my brother is going through this with his girlfriend right now. She's at her third university right now, working on, I can't remember what stage she's at. And so he's been bartending and serving and playing music and she's just been crossing her fingers and hoping that she can find a university that's in a major city that those skills would be useful and not in like the middle of Ohio. And like moving every 2 years, every 2 years they have to pick up everything and move. And they can do that because they don't have a family right now.
Yep.
But like, and his job's flexible. But if it isn't.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I grew up as a military kid, moving every 3 years because the Army would send my dad to a different station. Right. So like, so the picking up and moving thing is something that for me personally has not always been an issue. It wasn't really an issue until we moved here. And then we settled down and we bought a house and we had a kid and we have some roots now. And it's like, I don't want to go anywhere. Like I like it here. So you have to find a university that has a department that fits you, that's looking for somebody who does the kind of work that you do. And that job has to be a job for which they already have a long-term investment, so that they can give you tenure. And I want to say the proportion of faculty who are tenured or tenure track is somewhere around 40% nationally on average. At New Paltz, I think about 55%, I think, of our faculty are either tenured or tenure track. So here's how tenure works. You get the job, you get reviewed after a year, you get reviewed after another year, and they tell you as you go along, like, oh, you need to do more research, or, oh, you need to improve your teaching. Like to be the kind of scholar that represents that department in that college, in that university. If they decide that they like you, the department will write a letter. Like you'll put together a big thick file that has like your student evaluations and your service that you've done to the university and your CV, which has like all your publications on it. And you'll have to include like printed copies of all your publications. Like it's a binder like several inches thick, right? So you submit that, your department reviews it. If they like it, they write a letter in support of it. They send it on, I think, to the dean, who looks at it. And then that gets sent to a committee, reappointment, promotion, and tenure committee, whatever. Then they sort of review it. They decide whether or not they like it. And then they send it off to the provost, who is kind of a vice president who's in charge of academics. And then they write a letter, and then the president approves it. Again, my wife is the tenure track one, so I've sort of only seen this on the sidelines, and watching the process is horrible. So like, being a professor is really, really hard work, whether you're tenure track or not. So
are you working on getting anything published right now?
No, not right now. I should be. There's one chapter of my dissertation that my advisor required me to remove, and it was probably the best academic piece I've ever written. And I keep thinking about turning that into a paper and submitting it. But like, again, the kind of stuff that I do is totally not trendy. So like, nobody's going to give a shit. is what it comes down to. And that's like the most disheartening thing about getting a doctorate is like you have this expertise in a particular thing, and you have a lot of broad knowledge too, but you also have like, it's like a funnel. So you've got like really broad knowledge up here, and then you hone in on a particular thing. And some people think it's really cool and some people don't. And academia is really trendy. So like right now in geography, what's important? Climate science. Not even cartography, but like geovisualization, some forms of urban geography, like, so nobody gives a shit about cultural geography. Like, it's sort of a dying subfield. But
well,
I do
too. And here's before I forget, I want guns, German, steel, right?
Oh,
so when
yeah.
you said cultural anthropology and geography, I was like, all right, guns, German, steel, because that's all about how culture comes from geography.
Yeah.
I loved that book. I love it so much. I think of anytime anyone tells me they haven't read that book, I buy them a copy for their next birthday or holiday or whatever. And then I went online once, and there was a bunch of people saying that that people who are actually experts in the field think that book is bullshit. So,
yep.
And then I was really sad because I thought it was so cool. And so now I have an actual expert in front of me, and I've never been able to actually ask an expert, is it bullshit? And if it's bullshit, why is it bullshit?
Okay,
well,
so
I wanted to address your subfields. You teach two different classes.
I do.
Yeah, one physical geography. I don't think it takes much to figure out what that is. But then the other one is human geography, which I'm sure is the one where you address stuff like this a little bit more.
Yeah, so
I was more interested in your description of that.
Yeah, well, okay, so physical geography, just to sort of, oh my God, hang on a second, my cat's being a dick. Sorry, I have a cat, and cats are wonderful companions, but also complete assholes, and don't understand that, like, recording means, making noise. So physical geography is basically, you're interested in the physical processes that happen on Earth's surface. So things like the water cycle, the carbon cycle, atmosphere, how soils form, that kind of stuff. So pretty straightforward. Human geography is about basically the human processes that take place on Earth's surface. So, so when I teach it, I break it into different areas or different themes. I start with population and migration. So like the sort of array and movement of people, and sort of all the concepts that get tied up in that. Like, for example, you may have heard the term chain migration used in recent years, and usually in recent years it's had a very sort of politicized slant to it, but it doesn't have to be politicized in that sense. It can also be a descriptive thing, like people move to a particular place because they have people from the same hometown living there, or they have family living there. Like, that's essentially it. So we cover that kind of stuff. We look at political geography, so nations and states, how governments kind of interact, that sort of thing. We look at gerrymandering, for example. I look at colonialism and decolonization, particularly of Africa, in that unit, which I think is really interesting. I look at the Cold War because, and I talk about geopolitics, and nobody talks about classical geopolitical theory anymore, which they should. Which are these theories about like world domination and stuff like that are really interesting and actually undergird all of the foreign policy that you see the U.S. doing for the last 100 years, almost. Not quite 100 years, but somewhere around there. We talk about economics. We talk about cities and how cities function. We talk about culture. So that's when I teach human geography, those are the things that I talk about.
One time, I don't remember where I heard this or read this, but somebody pointed out to me in some form of hearing on a podcast or reading it somewhere that if you look at country boundaries where the lines are completely straight, a bunch of wars happened on that boundary, because that means that somebody came in and put a line and said, this has to be here and this has to be there. And if it's a wiggly line, then that it was actually a line, a country line that was based on people who actually live there. But if it's a straight line, then that somebody else, some colonizing power, came in and just drew a line there, which means that people are being split on either side of borders, and there's probably going to be some war happening there at some point in history. Yeah,
that's absolutely right. So, and when I'm glad that you said colonizing force, because that's when you see those straight lines in Africa and in the Middle East in particular, those are lines that were drawn by European European colonialists, especially in Africa. Like the scramble for Africa is a huge, like I said, we spent a whole day talking about that, which you could spend an entire semester talking about it. But because it's a survey course, we get to spend a day on it. But yeah, you have a table of basically white European colonialists looking at a map of Africa, completely disregarding the fact that there are people living there because they're interested in what resources they can take from it. And they sit around, they negotiate around this table, and then they draw these nice straight lines on the map. And then a few of them that are squiggly are based on rivers that happen to be there, which make good natural boundaries. Yeah. You see this in the Middle East too, where Britain in particular, but also France and a couple of other countries went in and after World War One, and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, basically go into the Middle East and say, well, we're going to take this away from the Ottoman Turks, and we're going to make these mandates that, like Britain is going to have this mandate, and France is going to have this mandate or whatever. And they, once again, draw these straight lines on the map that basically fast forward 100 years, and you have ISIS, who is, responding in part to something that happened 100 years ago.
It's so fucking crazy. This might just be in my head, so you can actually confirm this for me. So after I heard that, I was looking at a map of the United States, and I noticed that the states were more wiggly edged in the areas that were first colonized, and then the farther out to the Midwest you get, the more straight edged. And then I was thinking about how, like, all right, well, that's where people, I'm talking colonists, European colonists were first living there. So they developed their state lines around where their actual colonies were. And then when they were just dividing up the rest of the country to just steal, they would just put straight lines.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's reasonably accurate in the sense that what happened was, so you had these sort of original colonies that were pretty small territories, all things considered. Sorry, on the balance of things, relatively small territories. And then at some point, and I don't remember exactly when it was, the colonial government, I don't think it was the colonial government, I think it was like early US government, said, okay, we're going to send surveyors out, and they're just going to like mark everything, and they're going to divide everything into these nice, easy to manage squares.
Yeah, because the further west you go from the little corner of the Northeast, the more squared off everything looks.
Yep. And I think something like that kind of starts with the Mason-Dixon line, which is the line between Pennsylvania and Maryland, I think. That nice, easy, clean, straight line that cuts across. And then, it carries on from there. Yeah, and there's a whole phrase, there's a whole term for it that I guess I'm totally blanking on. It's like town and plat system or something like that, but I can't remember offhand, but yeah, there's a whole phrase that describes.
I don't think there's any other doctors of geography listening to this that are going to be nitpicking which word you remember. So
there might be American historian, U.S. historians who are like, oh, Chris, come on, man. Yeah, but this is also not something that I teach on the regular, so I don't feel quite as bad about it. But yeah, essentially, you see those nice straight lines because, well, you had surveyors who were just like, okay, let's make a nice big square. Here you go.
That was my angle. That's what I was thinking. They're tired of all this squiggly crap, and they were just like, grab this tape measure and run 700 miles that way.
Yep. And then they hit the Mississippi. And then they hit the Mississippi, and they're like, well, shit. Like, that's a nice boundary. We'll just keep that one. And then everything else is going to be square. And then you'll see like that one little piece of something that kind of sticks out. Like there's always a story there. If you see a nice straight line, and then there's one little rectangle that kind of sticks out from that straight line, you're guaranteed that there's a really interesting story about what happened there.
Yeah, I always think imperialist bullshit whenever I see that, like the Delmarva Peninsula. You know what that means?
No, where is that?
It contains the entirety of Delaware. That weird right, like Star Wars wing piece of Maryland, and then literally like we think of Virginia, and it's like Virginia. We know what that looks like, but there's a tiny little stupid carrot of Virginia across the Chesapeake Bay, connected to the Delmarva Peninsula.
Yeah, see, if they were reasonable human beings, they just would have ceded that entire peninsula to Delaware, and Delaware would be a reasonable place to be.
It's our peninsula.
Yeah, I'm looking at the map of it right now. Absolutely. That makes, I'm sure there's a story there, and it's got to be fascinating.
I bet they're, yeah, Delaware. I lived there. I doubt it. I bet it's a dud of a story.
All right, can you tell me real quick though your opinion on guns, germs, and scale? I want to hear it from a real person.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, so just as a caveat, I have not read the book, and the reason that I have not read it is because of a professor I had in my master's program at Albany, who had sort of talked about it and was really, really critical of it. And the idea is that Jared Diamond teaches in a geography department, but he doesn't have a background in geography. So that was sort of part one. But the other part about it was that it's perceived, and I from what I understand of it, justifiably so, as a kind of an environmental determinist kind of book. And
yeah, definitely, absolutely.
Yeah, and environmental determinism is the kind of theory that leads people to believe that people who are from areas that are hotter are lazy.
Okay,
or areas that are colder or more industrious. So like there's a whole sort of intellectual history and politics that's tied up in the idea of environmental determinism. Yeah.
But see, the reason I would disagree with that, I mean, not that I disagree with that sentiment, but the reason I would disagree with that sentiment applying to the book is because I felt like his overarching thesis was that the difference between how quickly certain the technologies advance has to do with the resources available and where you live. Not that the intelligence of the people or like the ingenuity of the people was any more or less, but in terms of need, you can't, like, one of the main parts that I'm remembering right now, it's been a couple years since I read it, but like it was that like you can't, like if you live somewhere that doesn't have large mammals like horses, then you're never going to develop technology around horses, which leads to certain other things. But it's not necessarily criticizing people, just what you need fulfills. Or what's the expression I'm looking for? Like the
necessity is the mother of
yes,
invention.
that's the word I was looking for. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for that. Sure, absolutely. Necessity is certainly the mother of invention. If you have a need, you're going to put all of your creative powers into figuring out how to respond to it. One thing, and again, like just to sort of reiterate that caveat, I haven't read it. The summary that I had sort of heard about it said something along the lines of, he argues that cultures that really developed in very strong ways were cultures that were arrayed along a sort of east-west axis as opposed to a north-south axis. And totally correct me if I'm wrong on this, because again, like this is a book that I should read to really give it a proper critique. But the sort of great cultures developed east-west and in certain parts of the world, and not along north-south axis because the climate changed too much. The issue that he runs into is that there's an issue of topography. If you're developing along an east-west axis, say from China into the Mongolian steppes and into, sort of Central Asia and West Asia, you're going to hit a lot of mountains and your climate's going to change regardless. So like if the argument has to do something about climate, that's actually not a fair argument. If it has to do with resources and the availability of resources, that's also kind of a questionable argument because one counterexample to think about would be the ancient Mesoamerican people. So the Maya, the Inca, the Aztecs in particular, who had ridiculously advanced cultures in a lot of ways, had building techniques that rivaled any that we saw in Egypt without some of the resources that were available, like a completely different set of resources. Yeah, they had stone, but they were also living in a heavily forested environment with a really bumpy topography, so they couldn't really develop the wheel. But they still had, these incredibly rich cultural forms, like the Mesoamerican ball game, for example. They were some of the best astronomers that the world has ever known, observational astronomers that the world has ever known. They had a more accurate calendar that was based on, both solar and lunar cycles, a more accurate calendar than like many other parts of the world did. So if his argument is based on those ideas, then I find it a little bit shaky, but again, like hard to critique without having read it directly. So, come back to me after I've read it. And
you know what I was just thinking, and this is entirely self-serving. Like, this is literally me asking for a free education. You and I should start a book club. You'll be the 23rd person that I've bought this book for and sent it to. And we will fucking read a chapter and then record a quick podcast of us talking about it and me saying, oh, I love this. And you being like, this is stupid because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm super smart. And I'll be like, oh shit. And we'll go through the book. And the reason why it's so self-serving is because, like, that's going to be an entire fucking anthropological geography class for me for free. Yeah, sure. And you should totally sign up for this, Cris. Come on, give me free education, please.
I'm on board. I'm totally on board. Awesome. I'm very democratic when it comes to education, or else I wouldn't be adjuncting, right?
I wanted to hammer on some school-related stuff a little bit longer before we all take a break.
Sure.
Just some practical, obvious stuff. I mean, as we said, Chris's wife is also a college professor of, you said, Roman history?
Yeah, so she's an ancient Roman historian, or I should say she's an historian of ancient Rome. She does sort of social history. So she's interested in, and in particular, she's interested in the ways that identity and language kind of interact in Roman Anatolia. So, like, the way that people use language to represent different parts of their identities, like, are they Greek-speaking people who are taking on a Roman identity? Are they Greek-speaking people who are emphasizing their Greekness over their Romanness? Like that kind of stuff. And I find her work endlessly fascinating. She also does a bunch of other stuff too, but like that's the work of hers that I know the best.
All right. So, I mean, we're talking about a scholarly household here.
Yeah.
A couple that both works in academia, and so obviously you both had to finish out that semester remotely.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And so what was the immediate transition like with that? Like, realizing, like, oh crap, we're really not going back, and like, I'm interested in what technology you used, and especially what glitches you encountered.
And I'm interested in hearing, like, did they tell you right off the bat it was going to be remote for the rest of the year, or was it like, did you figure it out as you went along, just like we did?
There was sort of a mix of things that happened. When we started hearing that COVID had hit Seattle pretty hard, and when we started hearing that there were cases in New York, there was a lot of conversation. So we have a faculty staff email listserv that we're all sort of subscribed to, whether or not we want to be. And yeah, it's the source of great and endless hours of entertainment. But there was a lot of conversation on that about what should be prepared for. And I think the university is like, well, we're going to stay in session, but start thinking about moving your stuff online. Here's some tools. And to be fair, nobody really knew how it was going to go. We were all sort of watching out and trying to predict where it was going to go. But as soon as they started saying, hey, maybe you should start thinking about what kind of online tools you can use, my wife and I were basically like, okay, we're going to have to move our classes online. Luckily, that hit right before spring break. So I think it was like Tuesday or Wednesday before spring break. They were like, okay, we're moving everything online for the rest of the semester. We're going to extend spring break by a week so that you can figure out how to transition your courses to online. So we didn't have to like drop everything in the middle of something and then move everything online. We already had that sort of natural break there, and then they just sort of extended it, so we had a little extra time to deal with it. And that was
right.
That worked out pretty well in that sense. Did everybody do it? Go ahead.
You're saying it's better. You like it better.
Well, no, I mean,
I'm just fucking with you.
Yeah, no, I actually think I think online classes are really problematic in a lot of ways. But
I totally agree.
But yeah, like in terms of us having the amount of time that we needed to put things online, did we have enough time? No, because everybody needs spring break to decompress. So like we really only had a week to actually get everything online. But that's that said, I'm glad it hit when it did and not before that or after that, because that would have been an utter nightmare. At least we sort of already had a sort of railroad track that we hit, and then we could sort of come back to it after that. So that was, and it was tough. Like different professors use so we weren't required to do anything in particular. Some professors decided to hold classes on Zoom at the same time as they would normally meet, so like they would require their students to kind of show up on a Zoom meeting and just be there. Some professors didn't do any of that. They just sort of like narrated PowerPoint slides and then said, basically, you're on your own. You can email me or I'll hold off.
I had both ends of the spectrum on the student side of things. It was weird.
Yeah, and then I think my wife and I took the middle ground, which is we both recorded lectures on Zoom, showing our slides, but also showing ourselves so that we could sort of pretend to be in the classroom and actually talk to people without it just being like, I'm reading a script that you now have to listen to and fall asleep to.
Did you have students online while you were doing the Zoom lectures or no?
No, I didn't, and I don't think
okay.
I think she did for some of hers. I didn't. But I also held Zoom, sort of regular Zoom hangouts where people could show up and basically hold office hours or talk to me about whatever as a group. Did anybody show up? I had 2 people the whole semester. So like, you know, and then I also like, I put up a discussion board where people could try to connect with one another. That was an epic fail because nobody likes discussion boards.
No. Yeah. I didn't use any of that shit.
yeah. And I get it. Like if a discussion board isn't organic, it's not worth doing. And you can't force it to have the sort of organic quality of like an old school message board, which is what I think people want to have happen, you know? So yeah, it was not an easy transition, but it could have been much worse than it was.
Did any of your classes have lab components?
Mine has, you know, I sort of give in scare quotes lab assignments, but I didn't have an actual lab. So no, I didn't have to deal with the like, yeah, you need to show up at the lab 1 hour a week and run this experiment. And yeah, like I can't imagine being like a chemistry professor or even a geology professor and having to figure out how to manage that. That would have been horrible.
One of the shittiest parts of my program going online is that I'm in like the final year of my electronics degree, which is a huge amount of lab. Most of it, like more like half of it is all lab, I would say. And we're not, there's no more classes left that aren't lab because we're in the, like, we've already done all the theory, we've taken all the calculus, we've taken all the physics. Now it's all like, here's how you apply. And trying to do that online was impossible. It was like, and they weren't letting us come in for labs. So our one teacher tried to do everything through a simulator, which didn't work at all. And then the other teacher, this is where I feel so bad. She did all the labs herself and had her husband recording her doing the labs and then posting her data. And then we would write our lab reports off of her, watching her do it was so terrible. I felt so bad. It sucked for us. And I can't even imagine the hours she had to put into like getting that taped and editing and her husband's free labor. And like, it was just like both ends of the spectrum, the whole totally hands off, like whatever, I don't even care. Just do it on this online simulator, which is nothing, to the other where she's like went totally type A and tried to do as much as she could for us. Both sides sucked so bad.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that I didn't have to deal with any sort of lab stuff because yeah, I can't even imagine what that must have been like, you know, and it's tough because, so one thing our university had thought about doing was leaving labs, like making sure that people could still come in to do the labs. That was something that was bandied about.
Yeah, they told us they were going to think about that in the email too. And then once like the spring break, because we had the same thing with the spring break getting extended by a week. Once spring break was over, they were like, yeah, never mind.
You're not coming back. You better pick up your stuff. You know, like if you live on campus, you're fucked, you know? So yeah, that was, you know, our education students too, who are supposed to be doing student teaching. How the hell are you supposed to student teach like this?
And if things, I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens. Everything is still up in the air. But after talking about the whole COVID thing with my nurse friend, what were we calling her? Nurse Peggy. Like, I just realized that this is going on. I don't think this is going to go away. So I'm really curious how we're going to be adjusting this coming semester. Luckily, my program doesn't have any summer classes, so I can't take any class over the summer. They have the whole summer to figure out, I guess, what we're doing next semester. But again, next semester, every single class is half lab. Yep. And I don't know how it's going to work.
Half lab, half golden retriever, still a delight.
Well, and you know, we're living in a new world. Everything, our entire landscape is changing. You know, retail is changing, restaurants are changing, education is definitely changing, and I think, you know, I haven't had a chance to listen to the Nurse Peggy episode, and I really want to, but my understanding of this thing is like, okay, we can expect a vaccine in a year to 18 months if they really rush it. If it's a good vaccine, it's still going to take a long time for everybody to get vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And then there's always going to be holdouts who don't want to vaccinate, right? So yeah, we're stuck with this for at least another 2 years.
Well, what I keep hearing is, and like, forgive my dunderheaded siphoning of information coming at me from every direction, but COVID-19 is a form of the common cold, and the common cold overall is something that we have never developed a vaccine for.
Coronaviruses can cause the common cold. Okay, so this is just my understanding of it, and I've been trying to disentangle these things too. That coronavirus, there's coronavirus, which is the carrier, and then there's COVID-19, which is the disease that it causes. Coronaviruses can cause all kinds of different illnesses, including the common cold, but COVID-19 itself is something that is completely different from anything we've seen before.
Yeah, it's like the family versus the
Corona's the clown car, COVID is all the clowns that stop
or one of the clowns.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like the language family versus the language itself, right? You know, you've got Romance languages, and then you've got French and Italian,
or like
and Portuguese.
Dinosaurs versus fucking pterodactyls. Well, actually, no, we looked up. Francis is a big dinosaur nerd. Did you know this?
I'm not as good as some people, but like I know some shit.
Well, everyone's a dinosaur nerd when they're like, I don't know, 8. But then some people maintain their dinosaur nerdery into adulthood, and some people don't. Francis is one of the ones that did.
Okay, so, are pterodactyls actually dinosaurs or not?
No. So we were talking about this, and we went on into an internet black hole that you get sucked into sometimes. Yeah, they're not.
I mean, here's the thing, okay? It's just like tomatoes aren't fruits. Like, technically, they're not dinosaurs. But for all intents and purposes, if a pterodactyl fucking lands on your car, you're going to be like, there's a fucking dinosaur in my car.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Perfect analogy.
I wanted to plug the shop real quick before we all take a drink refresh.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris just opened, this will probably turn into a little conversation. Chris just opened World's End Comics at 588 Broadway in Kingston, New York, a couple months back. Great timing, bud.
Yeah, I know. I think we opened our doors right as the first coronavirus case was hitting in Wuhan, China.
Your first customer was the coronavirus.
It feels like it, yeah.
But they're still doing like takeout, or not takeout, but I mean online and everything. Obviously, worldsendcomics.com.
Yep, World's End. No, not worldsendcomics.com. worldsendkingston.com.
Okay.
Oh shit! All right. Well,
because I think worldsendcomics.com will take you to a shop that's in Belgium.
All right.
Is that where I've been ordering from?
Yeah.
But do you still have like any kind of, because back when I was really into comics, I was like going to the shops and I had like my little reserve box. I know you can't do this physically now, but it was like everything I would get weekly, and I would just, so I didn't have to go there more than once a month. And then they'd have my like 12 things ready for me. Do you have like loyal people that are like, oh, I like to read, the X Factor 12 like once a month? Like,
yeah, we do. We have a pull and hold service, and so if there's like series that you regularly read and they've got an issue that comes out every couple weeks or every month, we'll order it for you. We'll put it in a bag with your name on it, and then it used to be you could just come into the shop and pick it up. We started doing delivery during the coronavirus and online. Like, we moved almost our entire inventory to our website, which is still under construction. It's a mess. But we were doing online sales and deliveries, and now, so this week we get to start reopening. And on Saturday, my business partner, Michael, who incidentally is also an adjunct at New Paltz and at Marist.
Really?
Yeah, he teaches philosophy.
Okay.
So yeah, you've got a philosopher and a geographer running a comic book shop. Like, that tells you something about our world, right? And not to belittle comic book shops, because we're doing this because we love it, right? But also, like, it's so weird that oh, you're a professor, you should be doing this full-time stuff. No, I spend a lot of time putting things on my online store, right? So starting on Saturday, he's going to be there from noon to 3, so people can come and pick things up sort of door front side or curbside, door side or curbside, I guess.
That they've already ordered, or can they like talk through one of those little like bars in a speakeasy and be like, "Give me Batman number 564."
Oh yeah,
pneumatic tube. Do you have a pneumatic tube?
Yeah, no, I wish we had a pneumatic tube. I think that would be actually. He's a really handy carpenter and sort of all-round sort of construction kind of guy. So like, I'm sure he could make a really cool pneumatic tube. But yeah, like. You can come and pick up
the thing at the bank.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, that's the thing at the bank.
Christ.
So you can come and
Elon Musk's ancestor invented that thing when a drawer would have sufficed. But sorry, go on. Bodegas perfected it. Elon Musk spent too much money on it.
Hey, this pneumatic tube goes all the way to the moon. But yeah. So you can go, you can pick up anything that you've pre-ordered, or you can say, hey, do you have blah, 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 and he can pick it off the shelves and give it to you. And you can pay for it there, or you can pay for it in advance. Like, so we're still, this is the first week that we're doing it. But I'm really excited to sort of get back into, like, I've been kind of sluggish on dealing with the shop end of things other than doing deliveries in the last couple weeks. So it'll be nice to kind of,
so next week when you're open, if I want to frequent your store, I should go on your website first and order it, or should I call you, or what would you prefer?
I think the easiest thing to do is to see what's on the website. Like if there's a current series where we're missing an issue or two, it could just be that we got them, but I haven't got them onto the website yet. So like you can always email us and ask. So best way to get in touch with us is either email us at weckingston@gmail.com.
Okay.
Or send us a message through Facebook. We do have a phone. It's a cell phone, and we don't, like if nobody's
about the phone, don't call their phone. Go on their Facebook page or go to their email. What's the email again?
The email is weckingston@gmail.com. Yeah. If you want to show up on Saturday, somewhere between noon and 3 and ask Michael if we have something in stock, you can absolutely do that. We are asking that people wear masks for their safety and for ours.
All right. Well, forget it.
Yeah. I know. I've just lost like 80% of everybody, right? But
no, ting, 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 ting. Excuse me, do you have Merryworth number 97?
No, do you have a mask?
No, that is why I'm outside.
Yeah, one more time that email, Chris.
weckingston@gmail.com.
And their website is worldsendkingston.com, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, check them out. What's up with the satellites in Rough Draft and Half Moon?
We still have stuff at both locations. I pulled a bunch of stuff off the shelves from those two locations to list on the website. That, confession, I still haven't got a chance to put them on the website because I've got a 2.5-year-old kid and no daycare. So my work time is pretty limited these days. But yeah, so if there's something that you think you saw at one of those places and it's not there, send us drop us a line. I'll be happy to let you know one way or the other.
And they order shit for you. They ordered me shit. So.
Oh yeah, we actually really like special ordering things for people, because we want to give people the things that they want, and we can't always predict. Oh, what's our audience in Kingston really going to want? Do they want this offshoot of X-Men, or do they want this? Do they want this particular author of Superman? Like, do they want this sort of offbeat stuff? Like, I like the offbeat stuff, but like, I don't always know who's going to like it. Do they want this new thing from Joe Hill? We take a lot of chances trying to guess what people might want to buy. But the reality is, like, if you want something, we'll just get it for you, and we're totally happy to do it.
Yeah, they've done it for me a bunch of times.
One of the ways that we get to know our customers really well, that's.
Yeah, it's effective. So let's do a PP and a drink refresh and come back like physically in 5 minutes. Is everybody cool with that?
Yep, very good.
All right, welcome back, guys. Thanks for waiting. What was that thing at the bank called again?
A pneumatic tube.
A pneumatic tube. I got to remember that. I'm gonna shape an entire special around my breakdown of the evolution of the pneumatic tube. But what is the deal? Anyway, I wanted to talk about your art, Chris. This is gonna be your least favorite part of it.
All right. I don't know. I don't know that I'd call myself an artist, but okay.
All right, already. You already argued with me about comedian, and now, I mean, if you like crap on some macaroni and post a video of it, you're a fucking artist.
Oh, that's way more interested in anything than anything that I ever do. So I'll have to try that next time.
Teller from Penn and Teller's definition of art is everything you do that doesn't, like, once you're done surviving.
Oh, interesting.
That's actually I like that fucking
Yeah, so that would
definition.
draw in, like, cooking.
Yeah.
Or
Well-
even if you're a race car driver, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's something very profound in that. I like that.
But let's talk about Radio Wiltwick.
Yeah.
As I said, Chris is a comedian and a performer. Chris has been almost every single one of my shows. And I found Chris, or let me tell you in my words what Radio Wiltwick is really quick. It's a satirical...
This is my favorite thing.
What's that?
You telling people about how you met me doing Radio Wiltwick is one of my favorite stories.
All right, well, Radio Wiltwick is a satirical news report about, if you're not familiar with Kingston history, Wiltwick is the original name of Kingston. And this is basically just a news update on an alternate reality where the mayor is a robot, the sidewalks are sentient and carnivorous, and there's mutant squirrels that like to copulate with birthday cards.
Yep.
The way that I describe it is that it is what's the name of that podcast? Oh my god, Night Vale. It's Welcome to Night Vale. Welcome to Night Vale if that was set in Kingston, New York.
Yeah, I think that's both of these are totally accurate.
But I found Chris. This is before we worked together, or before we ever. Well, it's before we worked together in a restaurant, and it's before we worked together, artistically. I found Chris on a stool at the Anchor open mic with printed out sheets and just reading these stories, and I thought it was the greatest thing in the entire fucking world. And so I was like, you need more than this. So we set up like kind of a whole like daily show set up with a desk, the microphone, and slides on a projector behind you to illustrate like all the crazy stuff you're going to. And it's always been a smash in every show I have. I usually stick it like, in the 3/4 mark,
It's so good.
Just to change up the tone. And yeah, it's always a hit. And yeah, I mean, would you like to describe Radio Wiltwick?
Yeah, what's the real description? You've heard our two.
I think the way that I would describe it is pretty close to how you guys did it. Alternate reality news broadcast, or a news broadcast from an alternate reality Kingston called Wiltwick, in which there are sentient carnivorous sidewalks and regular zombie outbreaks, and artists are insane and dangerous, violent criminals.
So like real life.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. And it's funny because it started out for me. I just wanted to write a sort of fantastic horror story about Kingston because, okay, so let me rewind a little bit. My wife and I moved here in 2013, and it was a Burning of Kingston year. So anybody who's familiar with Kingston, in odd-numbered years, there is a sort of street festival called the Burning of Kingston, in which the city, or in which a bunch of reenactors reenact a gun battle that never took place on the street.
I didn't even know about this.
Yeah, it never actually took place. Like, basically, so Kingston was the first capital of New York. It was made the capital in like May of 1777, and the British came and burned it in October of that year. But before the British burned it, basically the entire city was evacuated. And this is back when Kingston was really just Wiltwick, which is sort of the uptown. I guess now I'm trying to think back when the two merged, but there was Wiltwyck and there was Rondout, and there were two separate villages that eventually merged to form Kingston, and sort of Broadway is that kind of no man's land in between.
That kind of makes sense, actually.
And all they had was newsletter Wiltwyck.
That's right.
Morse code Wiltwyck.
Morse code Wiltwyck. Yeah, that's right. So
passenger horse milk.
Passenger horse?
I was thinking passenger
carrier pigeon.
Passenger
pigeon, and then I was like, wait a minute, they already had the William Tell at that point, so it would have been
passenger horse.
Pony Express.
Imagine the first person that rode a horse was like the person that invented wine or something. Like, I'm gonna get on this motherfucker. I'm gonna whisper in his big horse ear. Anyway, go on.
Just keep running.
You got it.
So yeah, we moved here in a Burning of Kingston year, and we moved here in July. Burning of Kingston takes place in October, and the more that we started to get to know, and we lived on Washington Avenue in an apartment in an old Victorian, and the more that we got to know the city, the more we were like, where the fuck are we? Because it was so weird. There were carriage steps in front of houses, and then there were reenactors walking down the street from the Senate House, and there were all kinds of just little, like, there was a random marching band competition at the high school, at the Dietz Stadium, and like every
where are we?
Yeah, every couple of weeks we'd be like, wait a minute, are we in Stars Hollow? Is this an episode of the Gilmore Girls? And then there was the Burning of Kingston, where we took our dog thinking, oh, this will be a fun. If you've never seen our dog, I call her the Red Menace. She's a sort of reddish brown mutt who barks at everybody, especially other dogs. And we took her to the Burning of Kingston thinking, oh, this will be kind of cool. We'll see these reenactors. We didn't realize they were going to have guns and cannons that actually, they lit fuses too and made big explosive noises. So she nearly choked herself to death running home.
Oh. And
my wife basically had to stop and pick her up and carry her half the way home. It was so horrible. But we were like, wait a minute. So we did the research, because that's the kind of people we are. We did the research into this whole Burning of
Academia.
And yeah, exactly. And we're like, wait a minute. This is a reenactment of a gun battle that did not actually happen. This is one of the most bizarre. And then you get to the end of it, and they try the mayor for treason. And all of the people, all of these, multiple generations been in America people are chanting at the top of their lungs, God save the king. And I went, we're still in the United States, right?
That is so weird.
Yeah, and especially because Kingston was known as being a hotbed of anti-British sentiment, right? So like all of these onlookers, these aren't even the reenactors. This is the crowd chanting God save the king.
Maybe
interestingly,
playing along like Rocky Horror,
I guess. But okay, so what was interesting about it was after the 2016 election, in the 2017 Burning of Kingston, the chant was down with the king. So it was really interesting to see that. Yeah, there was a really weird shift there, and I still don't fully understand, what that's all about. But yeah, so seeing that, and then the sidewalks that are made of bluestone that like you trip over them and then cut yourself open, and the sidewalk seems satisfied with the fact that they've gotten your blood. And the Old Dutch Church has the churchyard right in Uptown Kingston, and it was both really charming and really quaint, and also a little bit creepy and kind of wonderfully creepy. So like, I just wanted to write a horror story about Kingston, and I'd been listening to a lot of Welcome to Night Vale, and I apologize for totally ripping off their idea, but then it very quickly went from being horror to satire. Especially as I started paying attention to Kingston politics. And then, I would say about 80 to 90% of my material is inspired by something I've read in the Daily Freeman. So take that as you will.
I love that part of the political satire part of it, because I started hanging out with Francis over here a whole bunch. And then that's when I'm from Poughkeepsie. I'm from Dutchess County, most recently Poughkeepsie. And so when I listened to the first Radio Wildebeck that you did for one of Francis's shows, I watched a video recording of it. And I didn't really know that much about local Kingston politics, and it was so fun to like learn about Kingston local politics through a satire that felt like Night Vale. It was like the best way to have a little catch up on what's been going on in Kingston before I moved here. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoy doing it. It's been a while since I put anything together, and I miss doing it.
If you ever want to do one for us, and we'll you give me the video element, and I'll connect it to the audio. If you ever want to do one, you let us know. Oh
my gosh, the slides are the best part about it. So I don't think I struggle with calling myself a comedian because I feel like I have not earned that right. Because that's something that you get through blood and sweat and cocaine, and and I don't do those things. So. I mean, I sweat a lot, but but
do you bleed?
If you prick me, do I not bleed? Yes, the answer is yes, Data. Yes, you do. But I think when it came to the stage productions with Francis transformed me into a comedian in a way, because the slides, so when I was doing Radio Wiltwick as just like straight up scripted, like sort of like sitting at a microphone with, sitting sadly at a microphone with the sheets of paper in my hand and sort of reading them, and the crowd would be like, I don't know what the fuck this is. And half of them would walk away. And a few people would stay and laugh, or a few people would be like, oh my God, that's cool, which was great, super gratifying. But then as soon as I went on stage, I was like, oh, I need to do something visual. I know, I'm a professor. I make slides all the time. I'll just make slides. And the slides, the visual element of it is what really, I think, has made it comedy, if you can call it comedy. Mm-hmm. And that's been really challenging and a lot of fun to put together.
I mean, if it's not comedy, what the hell is it? I mean, what do you call it when fucking Trevor Noah or Bill Maher sits there and does their fucking thing and it's pictures popping up that are making people laugh? Yeah,
that's true. I think the reason that I hesitate to call it comedy is because I feel like I can't put myself on the same level as Trevor Noah and or Bill Maher or any of those guys. And I certainly don't feel like sharing a stage with fucking Francis Gunn and Andy McDermott and all these guys, and I'm like, oh my God, they're so funny. Why are they putting me on the stage with them? But
I'm just gonna throw this out there. This is a new era. Everyone's adjusting. Everyone's evolving. Being able to have a hilarious and satirical performance that involves visual as well as opposed to just like a stand-up sort of routine is probably very valuable at this exact moment. So
yeah, where's the Radio Wiltwick podcast?
Yeah, why is that not a thing?
It's supposed to be a thing. I've actually been. I met with a representative of a local radio station a while back to talk about it, and he was fully in support of it. But I think there was a lot of stuff happening there that he never put me in touch with the person I was supposed to hear from, or for whatever reason. And I don't think it's because they don't want it to happen. I think there's just so much on everybody's plate that they, are sort of pushing it off. I could probably follow up with him as well, but I'm also happy to do it independently and just produce it myself. I have a microphone.
Wait, independently.
Yeah, I have a microphone. I think the thing is they were going to host it for me, and they wanted to let me use their studio to produce it, which is fine. But I think I could also probably produce it at home. So
I completely agree.
I wanted to tell like a particularly fun Radio Wiltwick story. Okay. It's actually from the first time we ever did it. A little backstory. I was like day drinking with somebody walking down Broadway, and I see this birthday card in the gutter.
I know where this is going.
And I pick it up. It's a fucking squirrel on the front, and it says, "Go nuts for your birthday." And it's missing its googly eyes. you know, because it was originally intended to have googly eyes before the studio got a hold of it. But then I'm just like, look at this. And I open it up, and the thing is jam-packed, top to bottom, side to side, with signatures. And I'm like, whoa. So I start like reading a couple of them, and it's like, congratulations, Steve. You deserve this. This is your win. We're all happy, yada, yada, stuff like that. And I slowly realize this is the mayor's birthday card.
The actual mayor of Kingston, for people who aren't from Kingston.
Steve
don't know
Noble.
Steve
and I've
is.
already, we'll get to this, but I've already confronted him about it, so I'm not calling out anything. But, so then I'm sitting on this card. I become Facebook friends with him, and I messaged him. Oh, I might even have posted right on his wall like an extra dickhead. I was just like, don't worry, I have your birthday card.
You added the mayor?
He might have added me. Like, I don't know what order.
No, I not added. Not A.
Oh yeah, right on
not
this thing.
AD.
The people should know. But I was like, don't worry, your birthday card's safe. I have reaffixed the googly eyes. And then we did, in the first Radio Whitwick, in one of my shows ever, you interviewed me about it, and we absolutely crushed with it.
Oh, it was hilarious. In fact, I'm looking. I came across the photo of that card today. Shit, when was it? Was that April of 2016?
Good question. No, that was Thanksgiving time.
It was Thanksgiving? Okay, so
yeah, because it was called the No Thanksgiving Feast.
That was the first one. Was No Thanksgiving? Okay. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I actually have a photo of that card in my photos, and I'm looking for it right now.
I actually still have the card. I found it again.
I thought you mailed it to him.
No.
He came into the restaurant.
I don't still have it. Oh. Yeah, he come into the restaurant a bunch. This is the wrap up of this story. Is like after all this, he comes into the restaurant with like 10, 11, 12 people celebrating an approval for some city grant. They're all happy as shit, and I'm like, Jerry O. I'll watch the host stand. Here's my keys. Go to my house. There's a birthday card on this shelf. You must do this. And so he does, and then he comes back with it, and like I go over to their table, and I'm like, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to return this to you. I found it on Broadway like a year and a half ago. I'm sure that you actually wanted to save it as a keepsake, but accidentally flung it out of your car window one time. And everybody that's in the party with him is fucking dying, and he is purple. And he could not. I was like, as you can see, I reaffixed the googly eyes. Could not get this birthday card out of my hands and into his bag and out of sight fucking quick enough. And I don't know why, but I saw him in the restaurant a lot less after that.
Yeah, I've seen him come in a couple of times, but he and I have a history, so I don't know.
Oh, can you tell us history, or is that not radio conversation?
I mean,
that sounds so scandalous.
It's not. It's nothing. No, it's nothing that's scandalous. It's that I had applied to serve on a particular city committee, and 2 years went by. And lots of emails from me went by before he finally got back to me. And it was a moment, it was a very frustrating kind of exchange. So like, it's, yeah. I don't want to get into too many details about it because Does
he have any special like markings on his penis?
I wouldn't know the answer to that question.
All right. Well, then keep your secrets.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a secret. It's more, I'm just trying to be respectful of city government. Insofar as satirists can be respectful.
Steve Noble is, back when I used to be a case manager, we would get a significant chunk of our grant funding from the county. And so I'd have to go present our program to his minions every once in a while. But yeah, other than that, I don't know much about him.
I think his heart's in the right place, but I think he makes a lot of kind of rookie mistake. Like, who knows whether or not he'll ever hear this, and I hope I hope he doesn't take offense at this, but like, yeah.
I could invite him on when I put the invites out.
No, that's all right. Like I said, I think in general his heart's in the right place. I think he makes a lot of rookie mistakes, and I think he and I have some fundamental disagreements on certain policy issues with regard to development.
Yes.
In Kingston, I think he's more interested in generating tourism revenue than I am. I find tourism revenue to be, it's good in certain sectors, but it's also highly seasonal and really unstable. So like, and like I have some issues with the way the city has handled some of the big developers who have come in and bought up a lot of properties. Like
do you know about that development on Broadway that's across the other side of the street of the Anchor further down? I saw a bunch of like Facebook chatter about it, but I didn't actually pay close attention.
Where is it? Is it the one with the bicycle mural and at the old garage?
It's very large. It's right by the next door to the Dunkin' Donuts, practically.
Oh, you're talking about the one, the big Rupco building.
Is that supposed to be Rupco building?
Well, there's something that's around the corner from Dunkin' Donuts that is apartments. That's
it. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's that's Rupco. And I think my understanding of it is that it's a mix of affordable apartments and market rate apartments. But all I know is that all of the apartments have already been snatched up. And they're still working on it. Like the last time I drove by, the facade was, I think, done, and it looks like they're still working on it. So I think they've continued construction on it for the duration.
Dude, I could do a whole episode on my feelings about my case manager perspective of the housing crisis in Ulster County, because I'd
love to hear
thing.
It. Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I could waste too much time on this episode with that some other time.
That is definitely something I'd be interested in hearing about.
If you want to contact our mayor about something that you have a problem with in Kingston, just don't do it with a birthday card.
Yeah, and don't.
He'll throw it out the window of his tank. After biting the googly eyes off it and spitting them into the trash can. I wanted to hit on like a couple more very relevant, pressing issues with you.
Sure.
What media have you been geeking out on? Like, what are you relaxing? What are you watching? Movies, shows, and please don't leave out music. Let me know what music you've been throwing in there, and like whatever. If it's comics, if it's books, if it's fucking TV shows, movies. Should I say TV shows, movies again?
Yeah, you can say that again. Okay, so I'll just list them out really quickly. Books. I've been reading Slapstick by Kurt Vonnegut, which I got a copy of from Half Moon Books because Jessica DuPont is fantastic and I love her. And I've been reading The Divine Comedy, don't laugh, because I've never read it before.
Is that the subtitle of it?
No, it should be, right? But it actually is like, so I'm reading it in, clearly I'm reading it in English translation because my Italian is not good enough to read Dante in the original, not by a long shot. But it's really fucking good. I'm working my way through it really slowly because I don't have a ton of time to read. In terms of TV and movies, my wife and I have been watching, well, she's already watched all of The Witcher, but now she's watching it again with me, so that's been kind of fun. I'm a terrible TV watcher. I'm not.
Me too. I looked at that because people were saying it was good, but then I was like, oh my god, the one season is like 37 episodes. I was like, all right.
No, I think it's only 10, but
that's 37 to me.
It seems like a lot. Yeah, and then we've been sort of gone back and started rewatching Battlestar Galactica. We finally, after 3 years of watching True Blood, we finally finished that. Let me spoiler: the very final episode is horrible. It's the worst, one of the worst.
I stopped watching True Blood after season 2. I was just like, never mind.
It has its ups and downs in a big way, but we were sort of committed to finishing it, and we finally did. And we're like, okay, next. We've been watching. I mean, okay, two academics. What do we watch? The fucking Tiger King. You've seen the first. Francis
has not watched that. I listened to the podcast last year when it came out, and then I I was like, I don't need to watch the show because I've already listened to the podcast. And then I watched the show just because everyone was talking about it. Shit's fucking. The visual element definitely adds something that I didn't get from the podcast.
Yeah, I believe it. It's a fucking train wreck, and like, you know, it's so weird because it's such a bizarre segment of America to, you know, these people who own exotic pets, and not just exotic pets, but like dozens and dozens of tigers and bears and shit. It's yeah, exactly. It's it's interesting. I don't know if I'll finish it or not, but the 2 episodes in, I'm like, I kind of have to keep watching. Podcasts. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts.
Well, hold on. I just want to say real quick. I've heard this. Everybody can fact check me and be like, yeah, you're dumb. But I've heard that there are more, and I know Tiger King didn't take place in Texas. There are more privately owned tigers in the state of Texas than there are tigers in the wild in the rest of the world.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Not one bit.
They ain't fucking around. But
Texas is another country, man. Yeah.
One of my very good friends has been posting. She lives in New York City, and I get that New York City is like a shit show right now due to COVID and everything else. And she's originally from Texas, so she's been posting a whole bunch about like, oh, she really wants to go back to Texas. And I get that. Like when shit's crazy and hard, you want to go back home. But having lived in Texas as an expatriate in the state of Texas from the state of New York, dude, they be fucking crazy down there. And it takes everything for me not to be like, girl, you are just like living in fucking nostalgia land right now. Wait till you actually go back to Texas and then tell me how much you miss Texas.
There's a reason why Peggy Hill says, I am a citizen of the Republic of Texas in the very first episode of King of the Hill.
Because it was at one time, right?
Yeah, well, it was, and it kind of like
Peggy Hill wouldn't have been
I remember the burning of Texas. It never really happened, according to now, except it did happen. But Marty McFly and Doc Brown came back and married their grandmothers and made everything fine.
Well, just to make sure that anyone who's listening to this from Texas isn't getting mad, I know that Austin, Texas is like mini liberal land.
Yeah, that doesn't make them mad when you say that.
Yeah, whatever, dude.
Don't worry, I like Austin, you bunch of fucking
No, that's my point.
Idiots.
Like, because every time anyone's like, no, Texas is great, I ask them, what part of Texas did you live in? And they're always like, Austin. I'm like, all right, that is one city in the biggest fucking state, like, on the mainland of this country. So
and
please,
they'll be like, oh, but that's the capital.
So please don't tell me that Austin is representative of the state of Texas, because I've lived in the other parts and it ain't that great. But anyway, yeah.
I lived in a sex cult blimp above it.
Oh, what a light! Why are you here then? Why aren't you still in the sex cult, man?
Into someone's pool. We were flying low that day. Thank God.
Somebody pushed it and bumped you off.
Yeah, someone fucking bucked up on my asshole and I went flying right out the blimp window.
Why were we talking about this? Oh, fucking Tiger King, right?
Tiger King. Yeah, Tiger King is a weird. It's a it's a shit show. But when you need to veg out, like sometimes.
No, I thought it was boring. I was like, these people are pussies. I didn't actually watch it.
He hasn't watched a single second of it. So
it's one of those things where I feel like I'm getting the synopsis through social media, and I don't need to completely immerse in some 12-hour thing.
I feel that way about a lot of shit. Like, I still haven't seen fucking, what's the movie with the boxers and the guy who has all the plastic surgery now and looks like shit. God, I'm so bad at names. Boxing, white Italian guy. He's in a lot of action
Mickey
movies.
Rourke?
What? Rocky, yeah. Rocky? I still haven't seen Rocky for the same exact reason. There's a bunch of, like, cultural...
It's a little overrated. But...
Yeah, exactly. I know. There's a bunch of, like, cultural touchstones that most people know about that I have refused to experience because I missed the wave when it happened when I was young. And then now it's like, I don't really need to see it. I've seen every single reference that I would need to see to understand the... Like, there's no more cultural relevancy for me other than what I've already gleaned from Facebook.
Yeah, his trainer was the Penguin. He ran on stairs. He beat everybody and yells his girlfriend's name like a fucking idiot.
And honestly, I feel like, Rocky, it's funny because Rocky was such a huge cultural moment in the United States. But I think within the last 20 years, it has completely lost its relevance in terms of pop culture. Whereas there are other things that will almost probably never lose their relevance. I kind of thought Rocky was going to be eternal, but
I don't know. I still hear like cinephiles talk about it. I'm not terribly interested in it. It's like I get it.
Cinephiles, yeah, but not like it used to be such an everyday reference for people. On the order of like The Simpsons. Right. Like everybody has seen an episode of The Simpsons before, and everybody had seen Rocky. But I think with the end of the Cold War, and maybe about 10 years after that, it just kind of like petered out in terms of its relevance.
I haven't seen exactly. I haven't seen a single one of the Rocky movies except the newest one. And then like the point is that like the parts of Rocky that are still culturally relevant, I already picked up on all that shit. It's like Francis with Tiger King. You're never gonna watch Tiger King. I doubt you're ever gonna sit down and watch Tiger King, but you probably already know every reference that you would ever have to know to understand.
I know that bitch down in Florida kept him from running for president.
Yeah, that bitch.
Dude, she's all of them are absolutely batshit insane.
So after having watched the show after listening to the podcast, while they did touch on this a bit in the show, I have to say the podcast focused a lot more on how much of a fucking piece of shit Joe Exotic was. Whereas I feel like the takeaway from the show was Carol Baskin, that bitch Carol Baskin. You know what I mean? So, and I think that's kind of, I don't know if that means anything, but
she only has 12 tigers. Says there's 100 tigers here. Why does she only have 12 tigers? Like, where's the other 88
She
tigers?
fed them to all the other tigers. Now there's mad tiger disease.
Hey, she supposedly fed her husband to one of the tigers.
Oh my God.
One of the things I took away from living in New Orleans for as long as I did is if I meet someone and they're like, "Hi, my name's Joe Exotic." I'm like, okay, so you're a piece of shit. And then I like drift away and talk to someone called Joe Non-Exotic.
That's why you talk to me, because I am not exotic. Chris not exotic.
What kind of dog is your dog?
She's a mutt.
Mutt King. Did you have to fire a gun to get her off your leg?
No, she's on the couch moping right now, I'm pretty sure.
She's pissed because we're not talking about her.
That's
right. We are now, so perk up.
But I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Well, I'm sorry, which podcast do you listen to?
I've been listening to a lot of Radio Lab. Love Radio Lab. I love it when
they're a little. Can we both agree though that it's a little bit overproduced? I still love it.
The early seasons are super overproduced, but the more
really bad.
Like to the point of ADD inducing. But the more
sounds like Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Oh, like weirdly, like because I think the producer would just take a bunch of sound effects and pop them in and repeat them and cut them in a lot, so it'd be like. I just can't even describe it. You have to go back and listen to an early episode. But the current
people want buzzes and whistles. This is the golden age of the podcast. Yeah, I mean, a zing and a zang here and there, and a boing even.
He's mellowed out a lot in recent years, and the more recent episodes.
That's fair. I say this with love. I'm not criticizing. Obviously, they're better than I could ever fucking dream of ever being. They're so good. But yeah, early episodes.
The early episodes are super hard to listen to sometimes, but I love the stories that they tell. Same with This American Life. I don't love every episode, but like I really love the sort of escapist stuff that they do and the kind of quirky stuff that they do.
Do you listen to any Gimlet podcasts?
I think I have listened to a couple of them, but I can never remember which ones they produce.
Reply All.
I listened to one episode of Reply All, and it was the coolest thing I'd heard in a really long time. It was the one about the mystery song where this guy remembered this song that he swears existed, but nobody had ever heard of it. And
one that he heard in the Kroger's?
No, I don't think he heard it in a Kroger's. I think.
Oh, I'm assuming it.
He it was just a song that he swore he had heard on the radio, and he was like one night he was like singing it to his wife in the car, and she was like, "What is this?" So he went to look it up and then couldn't find it anywhere. And then he was like, "No, I know this song exists." So he tried to track down the actual song and the people who made it, and he couldn't find anything. So he put a band together or the producer had them put a band together to reproduce the song, which they did. And then they like spend the rest of the episode trying to figure out, like, did he imagine this? Is it a portmanteau of two other songs? How could the song just sort of disappear? It was absolutely fascinating. And I actually really want to listen to more of their episodes because I thought they were really good.
So they do a couple different things. So that sounds like one of their like super tech support episodes. Mm-hmm. They also do episodes where they describe memes, and that actually inspired a whole other podcast that I'm going to be releasing with David Britton soon about memes, because it was just so fascinating. And I was like, this should be a whole podcast. So we were trying to do it.
Wait.
You gonna call it Meme Me Baby?
It's called What Do You Meme?
There you go. Yep. Beautiful.
It's really, really good the way she's producing it so far. Like, I don't want to say too much about it.
The reason why I haven't released any yet is because I'm like taking my time and like making all sorts of. Speaking of doing slides and how slides add a lot to an audio thing, I've been doing the slide thing like you do with Radio Wilwick, and I haven't released any yet, but I'm pretty proud of how they're coming out.
It's
soon
so
to
much
come.
fun. It's so much fun.
What do you mean?
Yep. One thing that I found doing the slides with Radio Weltwick is that so I use Google Slides because I basically use Google Docs for everything, like Google Drive and all that stuff. Because it's so portable. Like I can work on it at the office, I can work on it at home or wherever. But there's a limit to how much data, and there's a limit to the number of things you can make a single slide do. And I think with one of the Radio Weltwick shows, I hit that limit and had to like completely retool how I was doing the slides for that episode. So point being, like, push it, but understand that there's going to be a limit to how many things you can do on a particular slide.
Yeah.
All right, hold on.
Slow down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, this is terrible. If you're still saying something, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, there comes a point where it just sort of bogs down the system, and then it stops,
Well, what the way that I'm probably mitigating that bogging down factor is that David and I recorded 4 or 5 episodes before COVID-19 hit, just audio. And now that I'm sitting around and semester's over and I have a whole summer break, I've been putting together slides that go with the episode that we've already recorded. And it's so much fun. Like, it just adds like a whole nother element to it. And it can't bog me down because we've already recorded the episode. The audio is recorded and done.
That definitely makes it easier.
All right, so we know the space launch failed today, right?
Did it? I was curious as to what.
Well, no, okay, that's harsh. They called it because of the weather. It was supposed to be the first like manned space launch in a really long time.
Yep.
But as a consolation prize, I just thought of this joke.
Let's hear it.
Who do you call when 2 words crash into each other?
Who?
Who?
A portmanteau truck.
Just
put it out there. That joke is public domain. Anybody can have that. I'm good. That's the only time I ever need to say it.
No, I just need somebody who's a really good artist to illustrate the portmanteau truck, because that would be.
Get it? Because that's a portmanteau too.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. How about your music? What music have you been listening
to? Music has been weird because I go through these periods of music where I find all kinds of new cool stuff that I love, and then I just sort of retreat. It's like my music is tidal. Sorry, that's my cat. Get out of there. Get out of there. Go on. Go play. Mostly I've been listening to a lot of Pandora, but I also listen to KEXP sometimes, which is a radio station in Seattle. I listen to the morning show on occasion, and that's usually where I'm hearing a lot of new stuff. I've been sort of retreating and listening to a lot of stuff that I'm already familiar with, which is kind of feels like a cop-out.
Yeah, it's also comfort level, though. Things are crazy. Yeah. You want to have comforting music.
Yeah.
But then it sounds like you're also like putting on shows and letting them like flow and exposing new things.
Yeah, always. And I did, I came across you guys are going to laugh when I say this. So there's this band called Altengoon, who played at the Anchor through BSP. They sort of booked him. It's a weird situation where they booked him and had them play at the Anchor. And I got to go to that show, And I'd heard them on KEXP, weirdly enough. I'd heard their single and thought, oh, this is amazing. Wait a minute, they're singing in Turkish. And then it turns out that they sing they do like covers of old like Turkish folk songs in like psychedelic funk style, which is a lot of fun. But then through listening to, I think Spotify, the like Spotify station for Altan Gün, I came across another band called La La La, who are from Turkey. Altan Gün is sort of based in Amsterdam, but La 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 is in Istanbul, and they're like the Turkish version of like Depeche Mode / She Wants Revenge. And they only have a few songs out, but they're fun to listen to when you want something a little bit darker and kind of techno infused, which is cool.
Well, when you say Altan Gün,
yeah,
I picture like some deformed like orc person with glasses telling you how to make pesto.
No, it means golden day. Altan Gün. That means golden day.
So Altan Brown means brown day?
Yeah. Something like that.
There's one more thing I really, really, really wanted to find time to touch on you. Or yes, I'm sorry. Touch on you.
Okay. Touch on me. Go ahead.
Your cysts. No. Tell us about the hurdy-gurdy.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So
I didn't even know what the fuck a hurdy-gurdy was the first time I saw his post. Like, I think I might build a hurdy-gurdy. And I'm like, has Chris lost his mind? Does that mean time machine?
Yeah. So the hurdy-gurdy is an instrument that was popular in like the 16th century or something like that. It was used in place of church organs for a while. And then it ended up becoming a sort of instrument that was in the hands of like street people. It sort of like fell from grace and became, if you're playing a hurdy-gurdy, you're really sketchy. And then Donovan came along and wrote a song about it.
Which was probably true to a point.
Yeah, it probably was. Yeah.
And then New Orleans. Get out of here with your
I'm
fucking
imagining like the monkey.
The monkey grinder, the organ grinder.
Yeah, organ grinder. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is such a poorly thought out name.
Yeah.
Hey, I got an organ grinder. And people are like, what is this psycho? And you're like, no, it makes song.
No, it makes kidneys. Yeah, and the funny thing about that was we were gonna have our kid be a clapping monkey for Halloween, but he got sick, so like our costume didn't work out. But like, yeah,
that sounds problematic, right?
Yeah,
there.
I know, it was really sad. I could be the organ grinder now with the clapping monkey kid, but like, yeah. So there was this meme going around early on in the lockdown where they're like, oh well, if you haven't made a hurdy-gurdy and done this and that and the other thing, then you haven't really been on lockdown. And I was like, well, fuck that. But also, there's a company called U-Gears that makes these models, these sort of models with moving parts. They're all made out of wood. You snap them together. There's like hundreds.
It's so funny because before you even posted about having made the hurdy-gurdy, I've been getting those ads on Facebook for the hurdy-gurdy kit for like over a month. And I had been thinking, oh, this is like grown-up Legos.
It's osmosis.
Exactly. So
because he was doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So like I had been getting those ads too, mostly on Instagram, but also on Facebook. And I was like, oh, and I remember seeing that, thinking, oh, that looks really cool. I'd love to make one of those. And then a friend of ours bought me the kit for my birthday. So I was like, okay, who am I to look a gift horse in the mouth? I'm going to put this thing together. So I put it together. I did it in like 3 sittings. I had so much fun putting it together because it really was like Legos for grown-ups. And then I put the strings on, and I put the rosin on the wheel because it's almost like a violin with 2 strings, and there's one that's a drone, and there's one that you can change the pitch on.
Okay.
And you put rosin on the wheel like you would a bow of a violin, and you crank it to make the sound. And I played it, and I swear to God, it sounded like somebody was trying to kill my cat. So I ended up. So here's the sort of coda to this, and I like posted a whole video of it on Instagram because I thought it was hilarious. But then the coda to all of this is that I acquired some actual violin strings, because the strings they give you are these fishing, like nylon fishing wire, and they sound terrible, right? So I acquired.
You know why that is, don't you?
Why?
It used to be made out of something a little bit more effective.
Yeah, like catgut.
Yeah.
Speaking of cats, yeah. But then I acquired some violin strings and put them on and bought some real rosin, and it actually it doesn't sound great, but it sounds a little bit less like somebody is trying to kill something, a little bit more like something. It sounds like somebody learning the violin at the age of 5, using the Suzuki method or something, like really squeaky, totally poorly tuned. It doesn't hold its tune very well. But now, so here's the problem with this: you make a hurdy-gurdy from a kit. It's not a good one, but you're also a musician, and you think it's a really cool idea for an instrument. So what am I doing now? I'm now shopping for real hurdy-gurdies.
Oh, they got you.
Hook, line, and sinker. My wife is looking at me like, you fucking asshole. You cannot spend $300 on a hurdy-gurdy. Yeah, so
you're going to be busking in the French Quarter in no time. Teaching.
I want to start like a hurdy-gurdy and glockenspiel band and play on the streets of uptown Kingston.
Okay, nobody
for all the hipsters who come up from Brooklyn.
Yeah, all the hipsters who all have their own hurdy-gurdy kit.
That's right. I know, they're going to come and look at me and they're going to frown and say, man, you suck. You're not a real hurdy-gurdy player. And then they're going to whip out their like $1,000 hurdy-gurdies and then I'll feel sad and insignificant again. And
no, if somebody gave me a hurdy-gurdy kit for my birthday, I'd be like, what the fuck do I look like? Tony Stark? That's the thing fucking on my face.
No, I like building things. Building things.
Yeah, dude, the Lego for adults, that's why that ad fucking appealed to me. Totally. I mean, the end product is awesome and all that, but like the real fun is the building it.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure like if you go onto their website and watch the video of the guy playing the completed hurdy-gurdy, they must have recorded somebody playing a real hurdy-gurdy because it does not sound like that at all. It sounds pretty terrible.
And so,
yeah.
Did the guy that like had the licensing to name the instrument, did they just like call him up one day when he was shit-faced? Like, what are we calling this thing?
That's a great question.
I don't know. Your mother's like a hurdy-gurdy. It's about the size of a violin, right?
Yeah, give or take. Some of the old school ones, when they were used in place of, like before there were church organs, they were huge, and it took 2 people to play them.
See, I was just thinking before you even described that fully, I was picturing old like supercomputers, and I was like, they used to be the size of an entire city block. It took 7 old-timey kids to pluck them.
That's exactly right.
With picks the size of a pizza pie.
That's something like that. It's a ridiculous instrument, but I absolutely love it.
Speaking of ridiculous instruments, I have come into possession of a accordion, which I thought to myself, okay, I'll accept this gift because it's COVID times and I'll have nothing to do but sit around and learn how to play a ridiculous instrument. But guess how many times I've touched it since 0?
I was going to say twice.
Not even when I haven't played a single note on it. I've been too busy podcasting.
That's really
inheriting an accordion is like winning the lottery and you owe them $50.
No, the thing is, I have no excuse. I have an actual accordion, and one of my very good friends is a professional accordion player who has offered me free lessons. So, like, I have no excuse to not be playing this.
No, dude, you should totally take him up on it.
In 2020, professional accordion player means, like, I've been paid to stop playing this fucking recipe. Somebody was like, can you fuck off outside my restaurant?
Whatever. Shout out to my friend Nick Collins. I promise I'll take you up on your accordion lessons one of these days.
Oh, get him to teach you his version of Funky Town.
Oh, you've heard him, right? Because he plays at the Anchor.
He used to play at the open mic at the Anchor, and
yeah,
I would always
he and I went to middle school together.
Ain't nobody play at the Anchor no more.
Nobody's playing anywhere anymore.
It's true.
So, Chris,
That's
we did fucking. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
No, it's just really funny. Small world.
We just did 2.5 hours, dude.
Are you sure?
That's insane, dude.
No. Yeah, where's my fucking $100 million Spotify deal? You guys don't get that reference. Joe Rogan just signed
No,
$100 million
I do.
Spotify.
I don't enjoy Joe Rogan's podcast, but I'm on Facebook, so I
But
know.
it's culturally relevant.
Yes.
Yes.
Whatever.
His interview of Eddie Izzard was actually really good.
A lot of his interviews are really good.
Yeah.
A lot of his interviews make me want to puke.
Fair.
A lot of our interviews make me want to puke. But yeah, we just rocked it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to touch on real quick? We're going to do Legos soon. That doesn't have any.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do Legos as an episode.
Definitely do Legos as an episode, man.
Yeah, we're going to do a Batmobile as our next regular episode.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you.
I guess if they call that regular.
I'm gonna send you an image through Zoom from Wikipedia of hurdy-gurdy players who are vagabonds. So
Excellent.
Yep.
Well, I would have assumed.
I'll send you the one also. Wait, hang on. I'll also send you the one of the 2-person hurdy-gurdy that is, pre-church organ.
Well, you know what? I'm going to use that as our playing out music at the end of this podcast when I edit it.
There you go. Very good.
Perfect.
Well, it was fun. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for doing this. This was great. And,
I'm sorry I talked so much.
No.
That's what we wanted. We both took a nap at certain points. You just didn't know.
Fair enough. Well, I hope it's not too much of a pain in the ass to edit it. So
No, this is going to be fantastic. And let me know if you actually want to do this book club with me.
I've already said yes. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
No, we're in.
Awesome.
All right. Well, take care of yourself. I miss you so much.
I miss you too. I miss you both. Like this.
Are you going to be, you aren't, you already said your hours. I'm working a shift at the Anchor on Friday. So if you're going to be there, I would see you, but no.
Yeah. Alas, I'm working Saturday, Sundays, but good luck. I hope they tip you well.
All right. Well, once again, say the website's the World's End Comics website.
It's worldsendkingston.com.
And the email for special issues of Mary Worth orders.
WECKingston@gmail.com.
All right. And I hope we get to, honestly, I'd rather that we get to perform together again, but if we just get to serve people again, that'll be okay.
Yeah. Well, I'll think about, in the next few weeks, I'll try to put together some sort of Radio Wiltwicks thing and send it to you guys.
Yay, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even if you did that for yourself, like 10, 15 minutes a week.
Yeah.
Like, just put aside enough time to have something that takes you 10 minutes to be like, that'd be a cool little thing. People check that the fuck
I
out.
would totally check that out.
All right, Chris, well, I love you to pieces.
I love you too.
And I hope the world comes back and you don't have to fucking teach through a speak and spell come this fall.
Well, either way, I'll survive.
Oh, I never told you my confession.
Oh, yeah. What's your confession?
I had a teacher that I hated so much, and then once things went COVID and everything was online, all the things that I hated about him were exacerbated to the point where I was like, I literally would get out of our Zoom class and cry, like every single week. Francis will tell you. And then I left in the meanest review, and I felt so bad because you were talking about review culture, and I was like, oh God, I'm that fucking bitch.
Whatever, this guy sounded like a
it's okay.
comic book guy.
But I think that's okay because like if you have if you have legitimate grievances against a professor, like their teaching style or that the fact that they're not being responsive or whatever, that definitely needs to get reported. And that is one thing that the reviews are really useful for. So like, and the other thing is we all take it in the balance. Like if one person hated my class but 34 loved it, then I know that like that I pissed that one person off. And if there's something I need to adjust, I can adjust. But if 34 students say, this professor fucking sucks, then there's something very real to that, right? So like you don't know. Like there could have been 30 other reviews of students saying, hey, man, this guy sucks. So like don't feel bad about it by any means.
Yeah.
Because we need that. And like it's important that we have teachers who can teach. So
Yeah, I tried to go to your class, and I waited 45 minutes for honey mustard.
That's the review I'm going to get someday.
All right, buddy. Well, give the lady and the boy a kiss, but I didn't mean to gender them too hard in case they decide something.
I think you're okay for now. No worries.
Oh, let's do our sign off, baby. Buttons are not toys.
Buttons are not toys.
Thank you, Cris. We adore you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast. Don't even bother with the high note. Someone is killing my cat.